Well, hello, all you metalheads. Next week at this time, join Dave Parker and I and our very special guest, Josh Wag, the death metal ninja from American Ninja Warrior 2021. Doesn't get much metal than that. Be here next week at midnight, October 9th, for Josh Wag. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on YouTube. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it, especially if you love the movies?
I had a dream.
Hashem told you to dance in a tango contest?
A dancing teacher wants to tango with you?
Critics are raving about Tango Shalom. It's clever and inventive, with right chemistry on and off the dance floor.
You're a lunatic!
A funny and thoughtful family film with a warm heart and a playful spirit. From the director of My Big Fat Greek Wedding,
Oh, there's my Fernando.
Tango Shalom, in select theaters this weekend.
Hello, and welcome to Midnight Metal. Robert Meyer Burnett and Dave Parker, they're fucking metal. Midnight Metal, Midnight Metal, Midnight Metal.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and this is Midnight Metal 51. Tonight, you might notice, Dave Parker will not be joining us. He is traveling early this morning to Arizona to go have a reunion with his brothers, who he hasn't seen in a while. A little family get-together. But, of course, he will be back next week when we have Josh Wag, the death metal ninja from American Ninja Warrior, as our guest. But once again, we're coming off of one great show last night with, guess we have, that's right, she's back again. And we will be joined by Lael soon at 12:30. We have a guest coming on at any moment. Do you know who we have coming on? First of all, are you feeling metal tonight?
I feel so metal tonight. It's Midnight Metal, Robert. Midnight Metal.
I know. Still an undefined show, but I get excited for it every week. I love it.
Yes.
So we had a great show last night.
It was wonderful.
I quite enjoyed it. I thought we're going to have more of a discussion along those lines. We're going to delve deeper into horror. We're going to talk horror. But before Lael is going to come on, we have Diesel Time. I don't know, for those of you who might not know, it's been a year since the Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival started. We still have yet to give out awards, but we will. One of the first movies that I received for the Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival was Diesel Time's Wiener Kill. And it's pretty metal, I have to say. And Wiener Kill was, I thought, hilarious. I don't know why. I watched it like 10 times when I got it. It was one of the first movies we got. It's rather silly, but I didn't care. I loved it. And Diesel Time composed some music for me that I use for Fully Articulated. And he has a Kickstarter for his comic book, and I thought this was very cool. His Kickstarter is Kalacha, Life After Death, about a Mexican wrestler who runs afoul of the Mexican drug cartels. And he wrote it and illustrated it himself. And if he, whenever he shows up at any moment now, we will talk to him about his Kickstarter that he launched yesterday. I think it's already 15% funded. The Kickstarter link is in the description of this show. And he's certainly a friend of the channel. And I like anybody who's doing stuff. And I think that's great. I mean, that's obviously one of the things that this channel is all about, making stuff. You're making stuff. You've become a creator yourself on this channel, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I've been loving having the opportunity to interview PGS members, finding out more about them, and also doing reviews of PGS members and encouraging other PGS members to go ahead and submit work to the Burnettwork to join the PGS partnership program with the Burnettwork. And it's been fantastic, Robert. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, well, and I've got more that tomorrow. I'm going to put up a lot more. I've got both your show to put up and more episodes of Set to Stun. I have an old interview I did when I first started this channel with sci-fi and Star Trek author and novelist Diane Duane that I thought I'd lost, and I found it. So I'm going to put that up. So that's very exciting. You know, Tango Shalom is still in theaters. It was, although it didn't make lots of money yesterday, it was number 15 on the box office charts. It's still in the top 20 movies playing in America. There aren't that many, but still, it's sort of a murderer's row. We had The Many Saints of Newark open, the Sopranos film, opening in theaters. And have you watched that yet?
I've watched a good portion of it. I love movies that go back in time like that. I love the costumes, the sets. They even had some turmoil in Newark, like they chose to use that area as a focus for the film. So we get to see some riots going on, relationships with other groups. It's really, I think, a fantastic beginning, which I feel is the beginning of something much bigger that they may have in store for all of us. So I think it's off to a pretty good start.
I do too. I mean, I didn't get to see it. I haven't looked at it yet, but I certainly want to, and hopefully we'll be able to do just that.
Yes.
Let's see. Diesel Time is there, but we can't see him. I don't know if he can see us or let's wait till he gets here, and if he does or not. Diesel Time, he's in the chat, but we can't see him. I mean, he's not.
I'm really excited to talk to him. This is just such an accomplishment from him, and it just shows that he really does have such tremendous talent. That movie that he submitted to the Burnettwork was so entertaining, and he just really has so much to give. We're just really lucky to have a creator like him being part of the PGS.
No, I agree, and he even made a sequel to Wiener Kill. So Diesel, you might want to try and click off and click back on again, so we can put you into the show. And of course,
I'm sorry. I'm so excited that he started this Kickstarter.
Yeah, I mean, and he's got the book, and he's print it and get it going. There's a lot of great creators that are using Kickstarter to finance their comics, and I think a lot of people going direct to Brandon Sanderson, who finished the Wheel of Time series we saw today on the members Zoom call. Stubble McShay showed us that beautiful 2-volume set that they kickstarted, and they raised $6 million to print that gorgeous book. And I feel that, that's gonna happen more and more. Hey, Diesel, you might want to try using Google Chrome if you have Google Chrome. Maybe that's why we can't see you.
Well, I had a chance to check out his book. His let's say graphic novel on Kickstarter, and it's so impressive. He has a way of just capturing the story in pictures that is just phenomenal. And the love that he took in this book, Robert, from the story to the beautiful pictures that he drew, I just love it. You can't wait to turn the next page, honestly.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I mean, it's great that we can support that work. And I like the idea. Look, I again, talk about Mexican wrestling movies like Santo. I watch those movies too, the way I watch like Chinese wuxia movies. I mean, not exactly the same way, but I always thought Mexican wrestling movies, I'm like, what is this? What's going on here? And the fact that he chose that milieu for his comic, I'm pretty excited for him, and I'm very happy to be supportive. I don't know where he is though. I don't know if we can't hear him, and we can see that he's in the chat. Diesel, if you can hear us, why not try and come back in on using Google Chrome. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes people's equipment doesn't pay off. But anyway, so coming off of last night's conversation, I thought that I wanted to, he's back. Maybe we'll have him. We don't see him. He's not there. But I want to talk more about horror. Like my friend Darren Scott, producer Darren Scott, who produced Menace to Society, and he directed movies like Deep Blue Sea 2, and with Rusty Cundiff, they've been doing the Tales from the Hood films, which they finished Tales from the Hood 3 is now streaming. And he was watching last night, and he was loving the conversation we had. He really wanted us to delve deeper into The Exorcist and talk more about it. So I figured, being that it is October, that we would talk all about, delve into like, what is the state of horror now? Obviously there's all kinds of horror. R.L. Stine books are being, the Fear Street series dropped. There's a Danish series that I was watching tonight that has an incredible opening sequence called The Chestnut Man, which is a Danish serial killer story. We talked a lot about great horror films last night, but there's a lot of Stephen King's latest book is out on the shelves. And I just figured that, horror is sort of a perennial genre that doesn't, certainly in the 20th century, it's never really gone away. And it is also another genre that attracted a large female audience over the last 20 years, which is something that that wasn't always the case. So I wanted to figure out if we could talk more about that. Again, I don't know why we can't connect with Diesel. I don't know where he is, but I guess we can just keep hoping that he can join us. And then,
yeah.
And
I'm
then
sorry. Go ahead.
Lael Rockwell will be joining us again tonight at 12:30.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. And it's interesting because Diesel Time decided to choose a topic that we don't necessarily see too many books about. We don't see a lot of books like this. However, the passion for wrestling, it's particularly in this area of the world, is just phenomenal. And a lot of wrestlers around the world are inspired by what they've seen there. So it is significant in the wrestling world, and I think that the idea of taking on the idea of drawing wrestlers, it's not an easy way to kind of and
Mexican wrestlers at that too. So
yeah. It's challenging to be able to, produce that and create, boards for it and come up with your graphic novel. But I think it shows just the ambition and the desire for taking on that topic. And it is, I think so nice to see a book like this, because I don't normally see books like this, and everything from the execution to the colors and the costumes that, we all look forward to seeing, because a lot of them are known for having costumes that are just absolutely, outrageous, kind of jumping into the ring, and, we want to see that, and we do. But then there's also a legitimate story in this book. And, and it is somewhat serious.
Well, it's funny because Lucha Libre has been, really popular. It was on the El Rey network, and a friend of mine, David Irwin, was involved with doing some stuff with the Mexican wrestling. Would they be leagues? And it's very popular even now. So I think the fact that a Mexican wrestler is going to take on Mexican drug cartels, I mean, I'd watch that movie. Maybe somebody
Right.
will adapt the film. And of course, here's the cover. Klacha, Life After Death. And this is the first book, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. I don't know if we're going to be able to get Diesel on the show, though. We've still got
Well,
time.
looking at some of the panels that he has, on the Kickstarter campaign, I just love the angles. It looks like you're watching real wrestling. The drawings are realistic. It looks so cool. And then there's also a panel where it shows, sort of the opposition or something that the main character is fighting against. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing their name right. Las Venganzas. And I mean, you can see the picture, and these ladies are tough, and I just love how he's drawn them. It just looks so cool. The colors, the shades, everything. I mean, they look really tough, and I wouldn't want to have to go up against these ladies.
Right. No, I know. Well, hopefully we can get him back. Sometimes it just doesn't work. But hey, if you want to check out his Kickstarter, it is in the description for the show. I did put the link in there, so everyone should check it out. And if you want to, we keep trying to get him back, but we don't see a picture.
I mean, Robert, you and I have been following comics, and many of the viewers here follow comics, and how things have changed dramatically in the comic book industry.
It's a mess.
And it is quite different from what we know. Honestly, between Kickstarter and Indiegogo, now there's this entire, foray of comics that people can choose from now. I mean, I love that Diesel Time has been able to go to Kickstarter, put on his book, and, and I'm sure, it was a long point from getting to where he created the book to where he was selling it. But what an excellent opportunity for creators today to be able to go ahead and sell floppies like this in a way that was never possible before.
No, I mean, and when people like Ethan Van Sciver, whatever you think of him or his politics, he did a great job with Cyberfrog and going direct to consumers. And there's a lot of comic, I mean, even publishers like Boom Studios went direct to the consumer when they were doing the Keanu Reeves comic they teamed up to do. And with the state of the industry now, I see nothing wrong with selling direct to consumers. I mean, that's what the studios are after all doing with their streaming services. They're cutting out the middlemen and they're going straight to the consumer. And with so many comic books these days, especially from the big Marvel and DC, not doing that well, the industry is really in a depressed state. But I don't think the art form is. I think comic art is as relevant and is as vibrant as it's ever been. It's just that the consumer base is different, and I think being able to sell direct your customers is great.
I agree.
I mean, I published my own comic. Actually, I didn't write this comic. This was written by Ben Rabb and Derek Hughes. But
yes.
I think I'm going to kickstart. I want to reprint it because it's been out of print for such a long period of time.
Robert,
I think we got our buddy.
Yes.
Can you hear us? Diesel, can you hear us? We can see you, but we cannot hear you.
Yes.
But I'll try. Diesel, if you can get your microphone to work, that would be most excellent. But we can see you. I'll put you in the show. I'll put you in, Coach.
Yes.
See if we can get it all to work.
Another person that I listen to on YouTube who is quite influential in comics is your boy Zach. And, he and Ethan, I think, are primarily, if not Kickstarter, Indiegogo, which is one of the other Kickstarter independent film production. Oh, dear. Comic book production sites, but not just for comic books. It's for anything that you want to to sell as a vendor. But your boy Zach has done some very interesting things, and I think that he's sort of a pioneer in it because what he does on his channel is he reviews comics, but he also goes the extra step and kind of gives advice to people who want to go ahead and, start their own business in comics. And I think that that is not only very clever, but it shows that he actually cares
Diesel.
about.
I think we can hear you.
Hello?
We heard you for a minute. Well,
We heard something.
we heard something. I think you said hello, and we heard you. Well,
Yes.
he looks kind of scared, like he's in a horror movie. Look at that. Check it out.
It might just be the lighting.
I know, I love it, but the expression on his face.
Yes.
Oh my God! It's like one of those, those the movies that are popular now, Zoom calls and things like that.
Yes. Yes.
Wait, we can kind of hear you. We just need some volume there. Yep.
Is this working?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Did this work?
Yep. Yes, it is. It is working.
Oh no.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Ah.
We can hear
So
you.
hard.
We can hear you.
Show volume.
Turn it up. Just turn it up.
Yeah.
Yep, we can hear you. Yep.
Yes,
What
that's
if I
much
turn it up?
better.
Welcome
Hi.
to the show.
Yeah.
Yep.
That
Yep.
works?
Yes, we can hear you great. You sound great.
All right. We're rocking.
We're rocking. We don't have much
Yes.
time, but can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Cool. Woo. That was not difficult at all. That was so easy. You have no idea how many links I had to use, but it's fine. We're rocking. Here, let me try to get some light. Yeah.
Yeah. Now let me ask you. Why don't you tell us?
Just swallow the microphone, as they say.
Tell us about your comic. He probably can't hear us. I'll bet.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Oh, there's a delay.
All right. Well, we can hear you. Pretend there's no delay and tell us all about your comic.
Let's see. Can I get you guys? Oh no. I'm on such a delay. This is so embarrassing.
It's all right. Don't be embarrassed. Just tell us about your comic.
All right, we're on a huge delay, but I'm gonna try to land this. So, all right, my comic book is an invention of my friends and I's passion for Mexican wrestling and skull imagery. We wanted to bring it together in a time where we felt like we had a little bit of ownership for it, but it was kind of becoming cool. Like you had the hoodie skulls. Robert Rodriguez was just about, I think, to launch his own network with the Underground, and we wanted to do something that kind of spoke for us. And we had this just gnarly character, Kalaka, and he like went back in time. It was really ridiculous and silly, but I went back to Mexico City, which is one of my favorite places to visit, and I stayed for 6 months working at a hostel, and I totally reworked the thing so that it actually took place in Mexico City, and he's actually taking on the drug cartels. And it's very, let's just say I stole a lot from Tarantino's Desperado and Once Upon a Time in Mexico movies. And so going back years later, it's my own story. He's taking on the cartels more locally as far as their influence on the local lucha scene.
Right.
So he's been disgraced for speaking out against the cartels. And now in order to get back to glory, he has to first clean the whole thing out. And once it's cleaned out, he can then, be the luchador that he wants to. But once he does he really want to be a luchador, or does he want to fight crime? So that we have to wait and see.
Ooh.
That's in the sequel. Well, so tell us about the
Now we just
Kickstarter.
wait.
I know you have to delay. You have to deal with the delay, but You just
This is
launched.
not-
You just launched your Kickstarter on Friday, yesterday, and it's doing pretty well. So tell us about your Kickstarter.
My apologies. This is where the delay. The Kickstarter. Okay, here we go. So the Kickstarter starts literally yesterday, Friday. We already hit 20-something%. So that's pretty good, I guess. You know, in just a couple days, hit a good benchmark. That means I got to start rolling out the bonus tiers. I got a buddy of mine in Mexico City who's an amazing artist, and he offered to do a variant cover. And then I got an artist down in Peru, and he offered to do the color on the Spanish version. So I have a couple of stretch goals that I want to do, and also just new tiers as far as new artwork. Oh man, I left it all the way over at my other. I had a cool little set going on the other side of the room. But yeah, there's a bunch of original art that people can get at the various tiers, and it ends on November the 2nd. That's the Day of the Dead, because Kalaka is, you know, life after death. He's coming back after a very serious injury, a coma that he may or may not have been able to come back from.
Oh.
And now I talk for so long, the damn delay. Here we go. I'm gonna grab some art.
Well, that sounds sounds good to me. I mean, I'm down.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful, Robert. I mean, it's exactly this kind of book that I think is perfect for something like Kickstarter. You know, we're getting to see an inspiration, something that, as he said, he's watched as a child, and, you know, now as an adult, and taking from movies, you know, he's been able to create this amazing book with an amazing story. And as we said, you know, it seems like there's a lot more to this story in this book, and it is entertaining and looks incredible. Congratulations, Diesel Time, on such an amazing book.
And he's going to have to wait till you catch up. But that's good.
Cool. There's a delay going on, so I'm just going to start. Here's a piece. It's a little more stylized.
Oh, wow.
Here's one of Kalaka rapping, and he's being booed and a can thrown at him. Here's one of him in his classic leaping pose. Here's a minor character, one of the guys who kind of gets beat up a lot. This is a bit of a version of myself who comes up later on. He's kind of a villain-esque character. He's a trickster, if you will. Here's Kalaka getting beat up by Kong, who's a big bully. Here's Kalaka and one of his lady, no, his one in true love, his lady friend. She's one of the Venganzas. Here she is taking out a narco. We got Kalaka in the hot tub or bathtub. We got Kalaka in the ring. I'm gonna fly through these real quick. We got him against Spider-Man. We got him against Wonder Woman. And one of him just flying through the air in the classic pose. Whew, that was a lot. So, yeah, that's some of the art that's going to be available for the different tiers of the Kickstarter. So if people have a preference, I know that was kind of flying by, not the greatest light, but yeah, some of the available stuff.
Well, listen, we want to thank you for being here, and we are here for you to promote the comic whenever we can. And obviously, we're big fans of you here at the channel because, man, did I love Wiener Kill? I loved Wiener Kill. So listen, man, we will let you go, but we want to stay.
Oh, I figured out the audio.
You did?
Yeah, I did.
So you can hear us.
Yeah, let me turn off.
Well,
yeah,
listen.
I have some things to talk about, like pop culture-wise and industry-wise. I'm not just here to promote my own stuff, and I'd love to talk about the show I got.
Well, we have to jump off because we have Lael to bring on. So, we could bring you on later, but Lael comes on at 12:30.
Oh, yeah, that's in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
Diesel, I just wanted to say that you're incredibly talented, and it's so wonderful to see what you've produced between Wiener Time and Kalaka. This is such an accomplishment, and congratulations, and thank you for bringing it to us to enjoy. You must be very proud of this, and it looks amazing.
Yes, thank you so much. And yes, it's been a lot of work. Thank you, Rob, for having me on. I apologize for not getting the link to work. I don't know, my phone didn't work, and then my computer got it, and then the audio and the
No
video
worries.
was all over the place. But so much. Everyone, I want you to look out for the meaning of Raskache. Get to know the meaning of that word because I know it's a tough one to swallow. We're going to be talking about movies that encompass the meaning of Raskache. So you got to tune in to find out what it's all about.
Where can people find you on social media?
Mostly at Diesel Time, DIESEL TYME. It's a tricky way to spell time, TYME. And also my YouTube is Raskache Media, RASQACHE Media. Oh boy, oh boy.
All right. Well, listen, thanks for coming on the show, and congratulations on the Kickstarter. And we will be watching it with bated breath to make sure that
Yes.
we'll have you come back on for a show.
Much appreciated.
All right, man.
You guys have a great rest of the show. I'll probably be in the chat. It was a pleasure to come on. We finally made it work, but now we know how to make it work next time, so we will not disappoint the people.
All right. Well, thanks for being here, man.
All right.
We'll see you later,
See you guys.
Diesel. That was Diesel Time, and he has his comic, and it's going to be great.
It's incredible, Robert. It's incredible.
It is incredible. I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm excited for him. I want to always support creators that are out there doing something new. I mean, and if there's another thing like we talked about last night with Lael and you, that having this kind of a network of support and people that will help promote your work, and that's kind of what we should be doing. I mean, that's one of the uses of YouTube that I think is so important. Well, as of last night, you know him, you love him. One of the greatest conversations I think we've ever had on this channel. Lael Rockwell is back. Yes. He is ready to party.
Hi, Lael.
There's hot toys to be talking about. Hang on, let me put him in. I put him in the show. Get him up, and I love how everyone's wearing hoodies now because it's like winter, even though it's 90 degrees here in LA.
For this
summer is gone.
Lael, welcome back to Midnight Metal, and I got to ask you, are you feeling metal tonight?
Yes.
You know what? I'm feeling something. I'm feeling more than just metal. I'm feeling something.
Yes. Yes.
Could be. Who knows? It's a West Side Story for you.
Yes.
So what are you feeling tonight?
Oh, man. You know what? Today has been a really long, interesting day. I'm feeling a bit euphoric. Let's say that.
Ooh.
Wow.
I'm feeling a bit euphoric. Yes. Yeah, I am. I'm feeling a bit euphoric today. It's been a crazy, zany day, but I'm here. I'm ready to go. Let's go.
Did you go to any of the women's marches and protest for reproductive rights?
No, I didn't. Definitely, I am in support of choice. For anyone who, especially if it's your body, it's your choice. I didn't go to any of them, but yeah, I stand behind those who, you know what I mean. Me, having daughters, having sisters, you know what I mean. It's I have to stand with them, and I think this is the way the world should be. Like we should stand with, what I mean. Anyone who has a choice wants to make a choice, and if it's their right to choose, why not support that, man? Definitely.
Well, I always thought that was the law of the land, and I thought that was
Right?
taken care of. And it seems like
It's
many
not.
things in this country, we're sliding backwards
Yeah,
on a strange path.
it's you know what, I find it that the ones who you know are are against that, who are protesting against it, are the ones who've never really experienced anything on that magnitude, or have actually known anyone who's experienced that. Because I'm pretty sure that if they did, the narrative would change slightly. You know what I mean? And if it was your sister, if it was your daughter, if it was your friend, and they've experienced that, how well would you support them? I think it's just it's what we live in a world now where it's the end thing if you're supporting or if you're against, and if you're in the in crowd. You know what I mean? That's just the way it is. If it's one of those things where it becomes a fad. If somebody's against something and there's a crowd that's part of that, and if it's a massive crowd against that, okay, I'm just gonna join that crowd just because it makes me look good. There's no individuality anymore, man. Like people just don't know how to make up their own minds. It's
No,
like a whole bunch of
it's
drones.
tribalism, and on
Yeah,
things like
it
this, I
is.
do think though that for the most part,
Yeah,
there's passionate arguments on either side. I mean,
on both
I
sides.
can
Yeah,
understand where I think everybody really is ultimately pro life. I mean,
yeah. We want
but
life.
the thing is, our society there's all kinds of personal issues. It's the most personal thing that a woman can possibly do,
Yeah.
and I do say a woman. I understand that. The thing is, it is a women's rights issue. Now,
It is.
I do understand that a trans man can
Yeah,
menstruate and become pregnant. I do understand that, but for the most part, I do consider it a woman's issue, and I
yeah,
understand, and I think that it's important that it stays couched in those terms
yeah.
because I think that women's rights need to be protected.
Exactly.
And I do understand, though, that there are indeed other concerns,
Yeah,
and that they have to be taken into consideration as
yeah.
well.
It's a
But
wide spectrum of things that have to be. We have to look at the simple fact that for a while, for years, this topic or this situation was never really given the spotlight that it should have been given. Women's rights to choose, women's rights to be part of something much bigger than what we see. It's never really been given a spotlight. You know what I mean? And the thing is, it's like I come from like a lot of people in my situation. At one point, I had both my parents that were together. I went from having both parents to a single parent home. My mother basically at one point played the role of a father and a mother. You know what I mean? She pretty much my mother is highly responsible for, my imagination. She supports everything that I basically do. She's the one who, my father, he's been very instrumental. And I'm not going to take that away from him, but my mother was highly instrumental. You know what I mean? So I think that, she's always been the strongest person in my life. So that along with, coming up and, raised around a whole bunch of women, I've gained that level of respect. And I really, I had to even check myself for years, because it's a trained effect. You see it on TV, you see how things are, and it's like, wait a minute, knowing that certain things aren't right, you have to go back and kind of reprogram yourself and become a part of the conversation to address change. And that's what I've been trying to push for like years, like addressing that change, giving women more of a platform to speak, to be a part of these conversations, to have the right to choose, the right to make decisions, that would benefit not only just them but their families. And I
Mhm.
think it's something that's highly important, man. Like, I mean, all of it. You know what? I think the world just needs more love, less animosity, and let's just, I mean, if we can create that, and Rob, I think that's why we're here. I think that's why all of us are here in this community that we've actually created, because we want to create love. We want to create that positive energy and just kind of just, you know, push that out into the world, and hopefully like it becomes infectious and they can all gain the knowledge that we put out.
Well, to bring it back around to the conversation at hand, when it comes to, say, horror as a
Yes.
genre, I've
Yes.
always thought one of the interesting things, what I've always loved about horror films, horror novels, I mean, I've always loved horror and dark fantasy. Horror and dark fantasy assumes that humanity is to be protected and preserved at all costs. In a way, horror is the triumph of the human spirit over the onslaught of great evil. And I've always thought I guess maybe I'm weird that way, but I've always thought that horror as a genre was kind of optimistic. And sure, there's a lot of like, I love it at the end of a horror movie when Mike gets pulled through the mirror in Phantasm, or
Yeah.
or Amy Irving, Carrie White's hand juts up and from the dirt and grabs her. Or
Exactly.
Jason Voorhees shows up and pulls Alice King underneath the water at the end of the first Friday the
Yeah.
13th. I like all that, but at the end of the
Exactly.
day, there are human beings that are going to fight against that evil, and hopefully they're going to preserve the world, preserve
Exactly.
mankind against whether it's the
Exactly.
onslaught of Cthulhu or the young
Yeah.
innocent. We talked a lot about The Exorcist last night, and one of the
Yeah.
things that we didn't quite get to was, the end of the Exorcist to me is in a way hopeful, because Damien Karras, our priest that has lost his faith in God, in confronting what we assume is the devil, finds his faith in that moment and is able to get the demon to come into him to leave the body of the innocent.
Exactly.
He sacrifices himself
So,
to save her life, and even though he ends up dying,
Yeah.
he still saves the life of the innocent, and he himself has found salvation because
Yeah.
God has returned to him.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very, in a way, a positive message.
And
Even though-
is.
I agree with both of you, but I also think that horror, for me, horror has come to symbolize things that you want to avoid or don't want to deal with.
That's-
And
yeah.
I think that for, like especially for maybe not necessarily just for modern horror, but the idea that anything that, even just in life from day to day, if there's anything that you're trying to avoid or you don't want to deal with, it can become the theme for a horror film.
Yeah.
And, I think that what's great about horror, in addition to the fact that you're avoiding those things, you don't want to deal with it. What happens when you're confronted with it? And after you have the confrontation, how do you respond to it?
Yeah.
And so, it imitates real life sometimes, because,
Yeah.
there are these thorny issues to you, perhaps not thorny to someone else. And so to the observer, you're not going through anything, but inside you might be going through the worst time in your life. And, I think it's very interesting to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah. I mean, it's what you find, like you said, it's finding, and also it's just like you as a person, as a human being, it's that person facing the ultimate fear. You're facing the ultimate fear, and at the same time finding your own humanity. Like you discover so many things about yourself. You become, at that particular point, instead of being selfish, selfless when it comes to humanity. And that's what with horror, there's always like that undertone that's there, that often gets missed. We are always rooting for the hero. We root for the hero. We want the hero to live, but we're not thinking about everyone else that hero has to protect. And if it comes to that point where that hero has to give himself for the life of the others, then we value that, and then it makes us think about ourselves. Like, we often hear, like, if it comes to like an apocalyptic type of situation, and it comes to my children, if it came to my life over my children, there's no thought. I'm gone. You know what I mean? I'll go. And that's just the way we look at it. But just imagine like how we feel, but then how do we view these films? Who are we rooting for? Like, the antagonist, protagonist, like, who are we rooting for in the end? So it's just a lot, man. Like
Mhm.
horror is excellent.
You know, I sent this article out and I posted it in the chat. I found this. It was Film School Rejects, and it's an essay published by Mike X. Nichols, and he published this on Halloween in 2018. And it goes in. It's a pretty great article. But what I liked is that he asked some horror authors that to weigh in. And the three quotes I thought were great. The first one comes from Meg Shields, and she says, "Horror for me is about sedition, an active, often gleeful irreverence for givens about our world, bodies, and values. Horror picks at sanctified safety blankets like organs stay on the inside and it's wrong to eat people. And it makes us watch. There is discomfort here, but there is also joy. Joy and relief at confronting the disturbance of hallowed ground and coming out the other side in one piece, mostly." I like that. I mean, the sanctified safety blankets, because organs should stay on the inside, you know. And I remember when I first started reading Clive Barker, I read a lot of dark fantasy and horror novels. I still do, but when in the 80s. I'm surrounded. I have so many of my 80s horror novels. But I remember reading, because Stephen King was talking about Clive Barker. And Clive Barker had published his 6 books of blood. And I loved it because at the beginning of each one of the books, there was a quote. And it wasn't like a quote of anybody. It was just something he had written. And he said, "We're all books of blood because whenever we're opened, we're read." And I always thought that was, I love that, you know, and his horror. I mean, I think one of the reasons it hit so hard was because it was really out there. I mean, his concepts were really, really kind of crazy. And another quote in this article was from a woman named Kate Blair, who says, "At the bottom of it all, fear and revulsion are among the most common human experiences. They are certainly the first emotions we feel when we're brought into this world, and to a lesser extent, we encounter them every day. Horror brings out the animal in all of us, and it not only reminds us of what we fear, it inevitably makes us ask ourselves why we fear it. These fears are not always specifically about death and decay. Those are obviously parts of horror, but also social mores and taboos. I think the best writers in the horror genre elicit strong physical and emotional responses that may not make sense on an intellectual level until much later, but the gut level is where the intellectual work begins." I like that quote.
Yeah, and I think one thing I like about this article is just that it shows the horror journey, you know, for horror in general, from, let's say, maybe 1920 for you know, when talkies started to present day, and especially in our lifetimes, in, you know, prior to 1970, and then going to present day, or actually from 1970 to present day, we've seen such a turn and shift in how horror is represented, in how, you know, it's been used, and also essentially just how it's kind of branched out more. And, you know, it's really just a great time for horror, honestly, because, you know, so many different genres of horror have now been created that, you know, it's just wonderful. You can actually pick a specific area of horror genre that you love and watch a ton of films that fall into that category. So, you know, this is a very unique time. And, you know, I think it's fantastic that we have that today.
Well, I just think that, you know, so much of human history was a horror show. I mean, nobody does worse things to human beings than other human beings.
Yes.
And whether we had to live through horrible pestilence because we didn't understand how diseases were the Black Death in Europe, what, a third of the population of Europe was wiped out by the plague. You know, then we had the ongoing horrors of human beings enslaving other human beings. I mean, even before the American brand of slavery, you know, slavery was a common thing. If you were conquered, the conquerors raped the women and took people slaves, and that went on for thousands of years. You know, the Romans, the Greeks, and then we had the American brand of slavery, but a horrible thing, that one group devalues another group, and the aristocracy, the rich get richer, and we're all enslaved. And then, of course, the wars and the horrible things we've inflicted on each other since, I love that I love Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, but what is one of the first things that happens in that movie? The monolith teaches one group, one tribe of apes, hey, you can pick up bones and use them to bash in the heads of the other tribe that are at the watering hole. And you can take the watering hole for yourself. And that's shown as being the dawn of human progress, is learning how one side, we can eliminate the other people, and we have the water, and that was the beginning of our technological progress. And just our very lives, that we suffer from entropy. We know that we're born into a world and our ultimate fate is to grow old and die. What's more horrible than that? Knowing that you have a finite amount of time on this planet. And what I've always liked about horror is it helps us sort of make sense of the world that we live in and come to grips with our own existence, because it's like, my God, I think being alive is such a great, precious thing, but it's always going to end in tears.
Yes. And it seems like, one thing that I do love about horror is that, you can immediately start to talk about thorny issues. So, it's not that thorny issues aren't dealt in other types of films, but, immediately if I watch a film with my mother and there's a thorny issue in it, she always asks, is this a horror film? And, it's almost like a cue, because for her, as soon as she sees a thorny issue in a film, she thinks it's going in the direction of horror. And I think it's a very interesting fact that she associates horror with that. But I think that it's also broadened the field of horror, because it allows thorny issues to be the main topic of what you're watching, which may not have been the case before. I think there were a lot of horror titles, if you tried to introduce, 30 or 40 years ago, they would have passed on that stuff and said it's too extreme. It's, it's not something that the public wants to see, and we're not going to back that. So, I think that immediately now it presents an entire area where creators can go ahead and take their work, focusing on things like this, and now they have a place to actually produce that type of work.
I was, it was crazy, because right before I joined tonight, I took like a long nap. Me and Toya were actually sitting back, and we actually started watching Squid Games. Like literally, like I never thought. I'm like, okay, please don't. If this is another Hunger Games type of, but it's different. It's so different on so many platforms. And the thing is, it's like with a lot of these, tropes or these shows or these films, even when we're talking like the horror aspect, you discover that it's less of whether it's a creature, zombies, whether it's an organization, it's less of that being the ultimate evil. It's more so humanity's decisions that become the ultimate evil. You know what I mean? Because everyone's fighting to survive. It's always it's survival by any means, whether it's good or bad. And you align yourself with, the strongest shall survive, survival of the fittest. That's what it basically becomes. And it's like, when you see that, the narrative is always taken from, okay, it's sort of like the zombies are like, well, we're here, but we'll wait till you figure it out, and then we'll eat the weak. It's sort of like that. Like, when you look at it, like, humanity is always its biggest demise. And I think how it's fleshed out in horror is incredible, because it basically, like, you're afraid, but then you just get wrapped up in like just the story and the narrative of individuals who are trying to survive. And you're like, well, I see this side's point, I see their point, but in the whole scheme of things, you both want to survive, right? And the ultimate horror is out there, but it's at the same time, the deciding factor is like, it allows you to look at yourself. And you're like, well, what would anytime a horror film can make you look at yourself and be like, well, what would I do under those circumstances? And you begin to question those things. And then you begin to look at everybody else is in the room and like, well, yeah, I know him. He never liked me in the first place. He's just here because he's with this guy. he might be the one to kill me in the end. So you start questioning everybody. Like that is, but for real, like that's the purpose of the film, is to get you submersed in it and to allow you to kind of see it through these individuals' eyes. And like some of the most incredible horror films that I've seen, like I say like one of my favorite of all times, and the original John Carpenter's The Fog. That film, like, just, when you're trapped under a situation, and then the sins of the past come back to haunt you because you've never made amends, and it's always been in your family bloodline, and you've just covered it up just like everybody else. And it's like, nobody, we're coming back for you because you're descending. When you think about that, it's just like there's so many things that, like you said, Rob, directors have been able to kind of slide in, and they're like, you know what, we're going to use the horror factor to tell a bigger story, but it's a horror film. We want you to realize that, you know what I mean? Like watching films like the, what was it called, the Hereditary. I was watching that, and people, like, it's very artistically creative how that film was done. I mean, it deals with so many different things. A family that's just kind of written by, like, culturally long a history of, just rituals and what they believe. And it's just like, yo, when I'm watching this film, I'm like, okay, you have a daughter who was just so innocent. You have a son who just wants to be a teenager. You have a mother that's just so, like, she's so, in a sense, like, psychotically trying to keep that family together. You know what I mean? And a father who's like, I don't know what the fuck is going on right now.
Yeah,
like,
and a grandmother that was part of a cult that was that was willing to sell them all down the river for glory with the beast.
Yeah, with the beast, bro. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I'm watching this film. First of all, it was the creepiest thing that I have ever seen in so long. But that's the purpose. It's to draw you in and then make it so creepy that when you go home, you're under your covers like, what the fuck did I just witness? But at the same time, it was just so good. And it makes you, if it makes me think and it's not a spectacle, then I'm all in.
Yeah. And I agree with everything you said, Lael. I've, one film that I always keep in my mind is the movie adaptation of The Mist by Stephen King. There was one scene in there, it's an interesting foray, but there's one scene in it that always got me. And it's the scene where there's, they're kind of like, it's, of course, the mist is like the fog in the sense that you can't see what's outside. And they're kind of in the loading dock, and there's a bunch of the group that are there, and there's a younger person who is somewhat more aggressive, and he wants to go out and confront this whole thing.
Yeah.
And, I thought that was very interesting because, we're suddenly in a position where, the right thing to do at that point is to stop him from going out there. You don't want him to go out there. And then he does. And it kind of makes me think it's, kind of apply to real life situations. Yeah. And that hasn't always happened to me when I'm watching a horror film. But here, I thought to myself, they should have stopped him. He's just this young kid. He doesn't know what's out there. He's so aggressive to go and do this, get himself killed. And I'm like, how many times have we watched the scenario over and over again? And we watch on the news and we're like, why does this stuff keep happening? It really got me. And I said, I almost felt like we were responsible. I didn't want to be responsible for this, but I felt responsible for that kid. It was, it has that kind of effect on you. That's why we come back to these films.
Yeah, we do. It just draws you in.
And it also, look, we live in a world where kids, this didn't happen 40 years ago, where kids would walk into a school with firearms and kill their fellow students, friends, people they know. And to me, that the there is an evil there that call it a lack of empathy. It used to take a village to raise children. Well, there's something that is now kids are there's something in the modern age that has stolen away empathy that has created this situation. And I think it's a combination of social media. I think it's a combination of parents not knowing how to parent anymore. That our civilization is no longer. We are afraid to take stands and say, no, this is actually wrong.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, no, man, if it's what you feel. There's all kinds of craziness happening where I think that, and this to me is what it's the basis of a great horror movie. You know, in the modern age, if we no longer have clearly defined roles, and no one wants to stand up and say, you know what, not everybody's correct, not everyone is right, not everyone's feelings are equally valid, and I think that we now live in a world where everyone's afraid of, no, if it's what you feel, it's fine, and it's not fine.
But it's not fine.
And
No, it's not.
and you know, it's like on one hand, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of marginalized voices that have not been heard, and those people need to be heard. You know, we need to hear the stories that haven't been told so we can understand the plight of people. You know, a lot of marginalized people that have never been understood in our culture, they never had a voice. And those people definitely deserve to have a voice, and they need to be heard. But on the other hand, we also have to start recognizing how the things like our planet, we are all interconnected, and we have evolved together with everything else on this planet over millions of years. And there are things there. It's a mechanism. Our planet is a huge mechanism. We don't even understand how it's all interconnected, from the submicroscopic level all the way up to the largest pachyderms in Africa. Now we don't even understand, if we allow a species to go extinct on this planet, how does that? We think, well, how is that going to necessarily affect us? We don't know. If you think about the planet, there's a reason why all of the animals and all of the bacteria and whatever the viruses that currently exist on this planet, we've all come up together, and we as human beings tend to believe that, well, we're beyond that. We're not. We live in a biosphere that is balanced because all of these things share the biosphere.
Yeah.
And yet we are so quick to pollute it. There's no global warming. Like, look, we do, in fact, spew particulate matter into our atmosphere that we didn't 100 years ago or 200 years ago. We just didn't do it. We didn't have the technology. The industrial age came, and yet we're still making it a political issue as to whether or not should we watch out for this kind of thing. And I've always said to people, I'm like, you know, would you keep 10% of your kitchen dirty? Like, would you keep a stack in the corner of 10% of your dirty dishes and just leave it there and let it fester? Whatever creatures would live on your dishes. I think most people would say, well, I wouldn't do that. Okay, well, then why would you allow the outside world? Why would you allow 10% of our industry to pollute a closed biosphere? This planet, it's not like things go away. The plastic in the oceans, and to me, that's part of the horror of what it's like, because we now have people that will actually argue that an acceptable level of arsenic in the groundwater is okay. That there can be certain industrial runoff from factories because, hey, it might not be convenient to have to spend extra money to clean up the environment.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in this world. And that, to me, there's the basis of a horror movie. Yeah. You know, I remember one of two of my favorite writers, John Skipp and Craig Spector. They wrote these great splatterpunk novels in the 80s. The light at the end, the cleanup, the scream, animals. But they wrote a book called The Bridge. And The Bridge was all about, like, toxic dumping and how basically nature was fighting back, but with these horrible, like, grass would suddenly grow teeth. You know, and it was a combination of, like, John Carpenter's The Thing and eco horror. And I remember just thinking we were absolutely screwed. And one of the scariest books I ever read. I do not know why it got under my skin the way it did, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. It absolutely terrified me. And it's a book called Dust by Charles Pellegrino. And Charles Pellegrino was the scientist who posited the idea that mosquitoes trapped in amber might be able to bring the dinosaurs back that Michael Crichton used in Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And his book, Dust, was about all of the insects die off. And when the insects, suddenly this massive die-off of insects, what happens to our biosphere, because there are things that insects keep in check. You know, predators and how things that were like dust mites that live everywhere on us.
Yeah.
They would suddenly grow exponentially unchecked. Yeah, there's nothing to eat them. And I remember there's a scene in this book where these people are on a beach, and they see in the distance it looks like smoke or something that's kind of rolling down the beach towards them. What they don't realize, it's a giant cloud of dust mites that is rolling along this beach, and it rolls over these people, and it just strips them of their skin in seconds. And because these are things that they're constantly being devoured by other creatures in our biosphere. And the book really was
have them left, yeah.
And it was a really unsettling book. And it was, total pulp horror fun with a basis in science. But for whatever reason, man, it really got to me.
Yeah.
And I've got it right over there, and I've read it like 4 times.
Yeah.
But I mean, the fact that we're the architects of our own extinction.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the ultimate horror of life, that we're so callous with our own world, our everyone around us, our own environment. There's nothing more horrific than that.
Nah. It isn't.
And Robert, we have a few super chats.
We have a lot. There's a lot of super chats. And I will get to them here. Let's we've got that's another thing. The super chats that people are sending in, especially yesterday and today, are absolutely fascinating.
Yes.
And I have to say, kudos to all of you out there for keeping the conversation elevated.
Yes.
Kevin sends in a super chat and says, "Is there anything more metal than knowing that the song Rocket Queen, Axl Rose and a groupie had sex in the studio and recorded the sounds which can be heard over the bridge of the song?" Well, I'd say that's pretty metal. As an engineer, Lael, have you ever had the experience of recording actual human coupling to be used in a piece of music?
No. No, but I've actually had to kick a few people out of the studio before it happened. Like literally, like I've had to do it. Like seriously, I remember having a it was a band that actually came in, alternative group, and it was a guy and a girl. Like I said, they were both lead, but of course they were a couple. And so we had 2 separate booths. One is where the live instruments were, like where the band was. The booth is where both of them were, and they would always miss their cue. And I was like wondering, like, what is going on? Like, we've mic'd up everything. Everything was like seriously. And it's like, come on, man, it's the rules and stuff like that. I remember the drummer. His name was Mike Eaton. He was like, yeah, this happens often. He said, but we just let it slide. We'll just have the jam section. When they just jump in, they jump in. I'm like, nah, like seriously, like I have other people that have to go in there. Like seriously, like what's going on? But I've never been in a situation where I've actually had to record the happenings. But yeah, it happens a lot though. I could tell you some stories, and I'm pretty sure other engineers can tell you the same thing.
It's rock and roll, man.
Yeah, it is. It is crazy.
And
it's
roll.
A crazy world, but it's incredible.
Terrier, who's in Norway, says, "You two are in bed with me," because it was just you and I.
Yeah.
It's 9 a.m. and I'm watching on my Google Nest. Midnight Metal? No, it's In Bed with Robert. Yes. Well, Terrier, you're my brother in Norway. I jump in bed with you. It's fine. I'm comfortable myself. Man says in a super chat and says DS9 is better than Next Generation. Prove me wrong, Robert. Well, you're not going to get an argument for me. I love Deep Space Nine, and I think that the season 4, 5, 6, and 7 are some of the greatest televised science fiction ever. It's a different show than Next Gen. I think Deep Space Nine was an interesting evolution. What do you guys think? Do you think are you Deep Space Nine fans?
I'm a huge Deep Space Nine fan. Deep Space Nine is my favorite of the Star Trek series. And I love it. I think that it had so many unique things about it. And it showed you that you can have a Star Trek series that's not necessarily on a vessel all the time. But I think it also demonstrated that Gene Roddenberry's vision can be applied to many different areas of the universe. And I kind of wish, authors would take that and use it to make his vision and use it to make other types of films and television as well. I love the cast, and I loved seeing so many members of previous Star Trek series brought back into the series because we want to know what's happened to them. And we got a chance to see that. We got to see more intimate and personal types of relationships in Deep Space Nine. All around, it's my favorite, and I wish it really existed. It looks like an amazing place to be, right outside of a place that has a wormhole right around the corner. I mean, what an amazing idea and execution. It was that's why it's my favorite.
Yeah, Deep Space Nine, it was really brilliant. Gene Roddenberry's his attention to just like how he makes us so, we're so empathetic towards like the different species, but at the same time, we're like rooting for them because, like I said, we're finding that story or their stories are just more interesting. You know what I mean? Because you're learning about the, how they insert themselves in such a world where it is highly diverse, but it's meaningful because it shows you whereas everyone's forced to work together to achieve the ultimate goal. And like, what show is better than having Hawk from Spencer from Higher, man? Like, come on, man. Like, Hawk was always my guy, and his voice was I always wanted to actually see him do more. It always thought like, like that he had the most universal voice that I can actually see in a science fiction film or more in a fantasy film and stuff like that. So I was so glad to see that.
One of the things about Star Trek was it had a lot of horror elements in it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like, I think about one of my favorite, when I was a kid, there's an episode, it's the last episode of the first season. It's called Operation Annihilate. And there's a planet, the planet Deneva, that's been taken over by these neural parasites, they look like flying fake barf, and they stick on the back of you, and they get in, they sting you and get into your nervous system, and it's almost like one hive mind is taking control of you, and everybody's a cell in this one. It's absolutely horrifying. And the idea that this alien life form has come and kind of like what Starro did in the Suicide Squad, from the Justice League, the starfish on your face. And that there's things like that in Star Trek and usually it's alien life forms that we don't understand, or they'll use horror tropes like Devil in the Dark with the Horta that burrows through rock and it burns people alive, and we didn't know it was just a mother protecting its children, and so they would flip the script on it. But for a while, you have this horrible monster that's burning human beings to a crisp. And one of the great things about Star Trek was the neural parasites were evil. You had to destroy them. But like the Horta turns out you think it's this horrible creature, but it turns out to be a mother that's just protecting her young. But they would still use horror tropes and play off that. People had to die first, and it was always a really interesting way to go. Even the Gorn, the green lizard monster, is shown as being a creature, a creature that's to be destroyed, and they do the same thing. Kirk doesn't do it, so they used a lot of horror tropes. The Doomsday Machine, the giant space amoeba. These are horrific things, and there's even an episode of Star Trek called Cat's Paw with witches and monsters and black cats and sorcerers, and
Definitely.
Man says, "Oh, go." He wanted us to do that, so he sent another super chat and said, "Go."
He's very, very generous tonight,
He has
man.
but he also just bailed. He said we're being too political.
Yes.
I mean, I think. By the way, I think horror is inherently political.
Yeah,
Because there's so much in horror that's about class and about class warfare and how people react and.
yeah.
I mean, look at like The Purge. The Purge series is literally all about politics.
All about exactly. It is, and it's like, with the purge itself, it's a way to or actually, control the population control.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? If there's way too many, let's get rid of the ones that we deem that we don't need. And they make it completely evident in the purge that it is a political thing. You know what I mean? Like that's just from the the inception of it. It's been that way. You know what I mean? Like that's just the way it is. So just
Have you both seen the most recent one, and what do you think of the most recent one?
You know what?
The most recent Purge.
Does it come out? I think I get it on disc. I bought them all. The Forever Purge. I heard that
when we're on again, we need to talk about that film.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I did? I showed you I got Daniel and Anna, right?
Oh, did you watch it?
I haven't watched it yet. I got it right here. I got it last week.
Okay, Lael, you have to watch that film as well. And it was is it Montalvo? I don't know his first name. Who from the PGS who recommended it because it's the same director as
New Order.
It's the same director as New Order.
Okay.
So Montalvo, I don't know his first name. He works with Roberto.
Oh yeah, but here it is. It's directed by the guy that directed New Order. It's a Mexican film.
Yeah. Yes, we need to discuss these films.
I know,
but I'm really interested in what you both think of the new Purge. And since you haven't seen it, I can't ask you this, but I really, really need you to watch these films when we come on the next time.
Okay.
We need to talk about just that film because it was so good.
Okay.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the Purge movies for the most part.
Yeah.
It's a series that I've quite enjoyed, and I like the Forever Purge because it deals with migrants on the border and all of that. And I think, again, look, we talked about Night of the Living Dead last night. Night of the Living Dead's an incredibly political film, and you've got, I love the fact that you've got this microcosm of American society locked away in this farmhouse under the onslaught of zombies, and they're all trying to figure out how they're going to all work together and survive together in the face of this calamity, the living dead, and it's of course all of Romero's zombie movies were political. Dawn of the Dead, the whole idea of consumerism, and then in Day of the Dead, the schism between the military and science, and in Land of the Dead, the haves and the have-nots. I mean, that's always been a part of, I think, great zombie works. And I find it frustrating that when people talk about, wow, you're being too political. I think that one of the great things about movies and television is it allows us to examine political issues, but outside. It doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, but when you discuss what's going on in a movie, you can discuss the situation as it exists in the film and how that works. And I think that's what makes these stories so fun to watch, because you can wrestle with the issues they grapple with, and it doesn't necessarily have to reflect your personal politics.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, because I had talked to like my cousin Michael K. Williams, before he passed, rest in peace, when he actually played Carmela Johns in the Purge Anarchy. And he was like, one of the reasons why he did it, and he became a part of the actual film, was because he is very selective about films that he chooses, and it actually has to have a statement. And because of what was actually happening in the real world at that particular time, and the statement that the Purge was making, it was an excellent opportunity for him to really play that character that goes against the status quo. So I mean, like, to say that when I hear like you, Rob, when I hear people say you're too political, or it's becoming too political, or these conversations, whatever, if to say that we're having these, it's becoming too political, then you must not really be paying attention or close attention to film in general, because that's pretty much in every film right now, even down to a Pixar animated television show. There's politics, or cartoon. There's politics in that. Like, so film is full of it. You can't avoid it nowadays because it's just the way it is.
Well, I think that people object to like having certain politics jammed down their throats, and I certainly understand that, and the virtue signaling and like I say on the show all the time, you cannot put your agenda before your characters and your story. Mm-hmm. But I think that some of the great genre, like I'll one of my favorite, actually, Richard Kelly, who directed Donnie Darko, directed an adaptation of a short story called Button Button. And they actually did this in the 80s Twilight Zone. And the story of Button Button is this strange man comes and he basically brings you a box that has a button, like a dome, and you press the button. Yeah. And if you press the button, the man will come back and bring you $1 million. But somebody you don't know will die if you press the button. And he'll show up at your house and he'll be like, if you're in need, you need to pay rent, or a loved one needs an operation, this guy shows up at your house and goes, hey, here's this box, and if you press the button, we'll bring you $1 million, but somebody you don't know will die. And then, of course, the thing is like, does the couple or does the person press the button? And then inevitably they do press the button. Yeah. And then the end of the episode, the guy comes back, gives the money to the person, and the person and the guy will say, and we're going to give this box to the next person, somebody you don't know. Meaning, you could be the next person that gets killed when somebody presses the button.
When somebody presses that button.
And the whole point of that story is to make you think about, do you have some kind of obligation to the society in which you live in, to other people that you don't know? And I think that's a question that might be a political question. You can make it a Republican or a Democratic issue or an independent issue, but it's really about a societal issue. Do we have a responsibility to the society at large? I'm never going to meet most of my fellow Americans. Yeah. But do I have an obligation to them? My answer to that question is yes, I think I do. We live in a society where I think we do have an obligation to our fellow citizens and the other citizens that aren't Americans, but are fellow travelers on this planet. Yeah. And if that's a political issue, well, it could be a political issue. But I also think it's an issue of basic human empathy.
Exactly.
Did you like the portrayal of the movie with Cameron Diaz, The Box, and did you care for that version of it?
I own that movie. I own it because it was an adaptation of the story, and I'm a fan of Richard Kelly. But the movie that's a very odd. Yeah. It's a very Baroque telling of that story. Yes, I mean, there's all of these extra things going on, and I'm like, what all these? There's a lot of strange choices made in that movie.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I also think that it's hard to feel sympathetic for the characters because they are so well off. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not quite sure whether that's what the original story intended you to feel, but that is exactly how I felt, because when you look at them and they had so much, and, it's like, okay, maybe you live in a smaller house. Like, you can do that. Go ahead and do that. But it was very hard to be sympathetic for them. So, so you knew it was terrible what they were going to do, because when Frank Langella walked in, there was something off about him, literally off about him. So,
I mean, I think first, I don't think the movie works very well. Mm-hmm. I love the 80s Twilight Zone episode. You can watch it on YouTube.
Yes.
I love that the idea of that story, because that choice, it goes back to like what was the Demi Moore, Woody Harrelson, Robert Redford movie, Indecent Proposal.
The Indecent Proposal, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I mean, I love that idea. You know, you're a happily married couple. You think your love is strong. You need money. Some rich billionaire wanders in and says to you as the man, listen, I'll give you $1 million or $10 million if you let me spend the night with your wife. You know, and I mean, that, first of all, that's an irresistible story. There's an element of horror in there.
Yes.
You know, like, and then the question is how the Bee Gees song, how deep is your love?
But also, if they were into swinging, it wouldn't have mattered, because they would have been like, yeah, sure, no problem. But this is a couple that's not into that. You know, they're in a committed monogamous relationship, and introducing this into this is just going to cause, you know, just a nightmare for them, which it did. But you know, I think that part of the fun for the person who was pursuing her is the fact that they were in a monogamous relationship. He wanted to break that.
Yeah.
You know,
exerting
and
power.
It caused so much of a rift within the relationship, because that speculation, you know, it's like, well, what did you do? Well, why did you do it? Or why did I let you do this? Or you made me do this. And it's just like, it's tearing them apart. But at the end of the day, he's still a millionaire.
Right. And also, I mean, there's also the whole thing like, well, the primal, was he better in bed than I am?
Yeah.
Does he have a bigger dick? Does he get you off more? You know, and if that's the case, then you can't compete against that, because if you rock her world, you know, and you've got this, you might love each other, but if you have a maudlin sex life and somebody rolls in and knows how to really rock that woman's world, it's going to be really hard to convince. Like, how do you to me, that's the true horror, is that, God, I'm going to lose. I'm going to lose her because there's nothing I can do. I'm not going to be a better lover than him, and he's a billionaire.
Exactly.
So,
and it's just like, you imagine that conversation. It's like, babe, did he touch that spot? That did you know, when you think about that, it's just like, like, did he, like, how could you let him do that? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, just the horror factor in that is like, yo, was the money really worth it? And then it also speaks to human conditioning.
Yep.
Do we value that more than the construct or the aspect of what love really means? Mm-hmm. Do we value money in all that we choose or wish to desire over the concept of love? Like, literally, like, am I that selfish? Do I become selfless or selfish thinking about all the things I can do with $1 million versus, okay, well, if I got this $1 million and if you did that, that's more of an excuse to me to say, you know what? I don't want to be with you anymore, and I can keep the money for myself. Like, literally, like, when you think about those things, it's like, what goes through that mind? Like, was that love really worth it? And was it really love to begin with? Because you even entertain the idea. Like, it's so much, man.
And not only that, I mean, and that's why the scenario, and you get into horror stories like a choice. That's why something like Pet Sematary. It's like, man, if your child is killed, but you have a way to bring your child back, can any parent resist that urge? And of course, it's the monkey's paw story. I mean, ultimately, the father, Gabe, you know, gets buried in the pet cemetery and comes back, and he's like, how do you do that? And the funny thing about it, is like, we want to believe, from a storytelling standpoint, that like true love prevails in the sense of Indecent Proposal. But if you're a woman, and let's say you've never been with a man who's, you know, great in bed, and if you do wind up with a man who is fantastic in bed and brings you a physical pleasure that you've never known, and can do it whenever he wants, whenever you want, and it's something that the man you're already in love with cannot do. Right. That kind of physical pleasure, and it could last for a long time. I mean, well, it fades. Does it? Like
Does it
for
really?
20 years, it'd be pretty good if that's what I'm gonna, if that's what I'm getting. And so,
This has been used as a reason for couples to venture outside of the the coupling, just two people, and it has been used
Yeah.
as a reason to not just have two people in a relationship, but
yeah.
to allow one person to go out, not just the woman but a man. Like, let's say the female does not want to, or however your relationship, one person doesn't want to do this or doesn't do this, and it's not fair to the other person, and they decide equally that it's okay to venture outside of that mark.
Yeah.
And it's a conscious decision. I mean,
Yeah.
it does happen.
Oh,
I mean,
it happens all the time. But I think that's because they've come, and what's really interesting is you have to be fairly progressive to be that. And to me, when people say that they're progressive, that's the kind of thing that I think about, is that they're able to break free of the of societal, what our society deems right and wrong. I think a lot of what they call progressive isn't really progressive. I mean, it is. I think that's the wrong word for it. Whereas, to me, being liberal or being progressive just means you're open to new ideas. It means that you're willing to break free of the bonds of polite society and try something new, like a throuple or whatever. If that's what you want to do. But at the end, I do think that it. And that's the root of horror to me too, is that horror is always examining alternative lifestyles, or it's pushing the boundaries of acceptable behavior into, like, that's the whole thing. If you suddenly can be an immortal, we talked about, would you be a vampire last night? I mean, you'd have to change your morality as a human being. Like, well, if human beings suddenly become my food, and I have to figure out a way, like, you could, sometimes movies, they show vampires that go to blood banks or whatever, but let's just say that you couldn't. And suddenly you'd have to change your morality and be like, well, I'm looking at human beings as cattle, they're food. Then you'd start making spectrums in your own mind. Like, well, these people I can eat, but these people I can't. And suddenly you're going to be weighing actual human beings in your mind, and that has happened in our world. In the 20th century, you had Germany decide, these Jews, they're not human anymore. Let's systematically take them out. Let's just get rid of them all.
Horror films also can be exhilarating. So, this is like films of an adult nature, films of a sexual nature. Horror films can have that same exhilarating feel. And it can happen when you least expect it, when you're watching a horror film, where you get that sudden rush and stimulation, whether there's nudity in the film or not. Like, it's completely irrelevant. Sometimes it can be just even the simplest thing, where you just are so filled with this adrenaline from the horror film and the exhilaration, the excitement of it, that sometimes isn't really matched by other films. And I think people, just like, you don't have to be an adrenaline junkie to even get that or enjoy that. It's just something inherently built into the film by the director, by the screenplay writer, who brings that to you. And that's also something that I love about horror films.
And what I always use this film because, like I said, I look at it and I'm like, what, this was the start of an idea, and not just an idea, but it's something that we've seen in other films. Like when you think about Dawn of the Dead, and you think about basically how they basically created their own utopia inside of an actual shopping mall.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, inside of a shopping mall. You know what I mean? Like, they've actually created that where there were no rules. We live life the way we want inside of this place, because we have to maintain a certain level of order within ourselves. But it's like everybody can do what they want to do as long as you don't violate certain things. And like, you just got to make sure everybody is accounted for. You know what I mean? Going on top of the roof, picking off the dead. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, just like when you think about that, you know what I mean? Guy comes in who just basically lives life vicariously anyway, like has his, I don't know if she was a hooker or whatever you want to call her, but he treated her like a piece of meat, whatever. But you look at those films and it's like, humanity will condense itself down to like the smallest level inside of a place to create. It's like, all right, this is our opportunity to do what the fuck we want. Let's
Yes.
do it. You know what I mean? We could die tomorrow, so let's think about today. Oh, we live today, so let's think about what we're gonna do tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like it speaks. Horror just allows you to see humanity the way it really is, but it's hidden. You know what I mean? Like it's
And
just hidden.
I agree with that, and I think that movies like The Purge give you that exhilaration.
Yeah.
Because if there's any horror film that tells you I'm going to go ahead and live and do whatever I want to do, you know, everybody wants to have that feeling of where we can just do whatever we want to do.
Oh yeah.
The Purge is the perfect example of this, but there are also films like, you know, obviously on a smaller scale, a person committing crimes. This is what they want to do. And, you know, the horror of, you know, taking victims and, you know, no one knows about it. Only you know about it because that you're the bad guy in the film or whoever is the bad guy in the film. But that exhilarating feeling, even if it's just on a one-on-one level, you know, a person who's sort of like trapped or kept as a prisoner and you just know something horrible is going to happen because you're watching a horror film. And like, you know, it's I guess it's like a guilty pleasure because we're watching this and we know something bad is going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, like it's kind of very interesting kind of to look at it from that point of view, you know, getting an exhilaration from something that is in a horror film, you know, how do you interpret that when you know it's something that's bad, you know? I mean, but we watch it, we still go to it. It's
And you know what? I'm gonna say that I'm guilty of certain things as well. I'm guilty. This is what I'm guilty of when I watch horror films because it always happens. This always basically happens.
Okay.
A person's connection to a person's connection to a pet, right? So your connection to that pet and a group of individuals, and when that pet decides to run off. It runs off and you're like, no, we have to get Mikey. It's like, wait a minute, you're gonna die if you go chasing Mikey and we're trying to leave, but you want to chase Mikey. Mikey chose to live his life the way he wanted to, but then I had to think about it. I'm like, wait a minute, if I have a dog and I love my dog, you know what I mean, what would I do? Like, would I handle it the same way? Because there's been many times that my dog would run off and run outside, run somewhere, and I'm actually frantically trying to find him no matter what. If I'm late, even if like I've been late to appointments, I'm trying to find my dog because I have a connection to that dog. Horror films, I'm telling you, they are a dictionary and encyclopedia to our lives, man. Because it's like, you know what?
I like that. I like that very much.
We're like, damn, we do some stupid shit too, so we can't blame them for. I can't blame you for chasing Mikey. Go get Mikey. Go get Mikey. Mikey needs to live. You know what I mean? So it's crazy. It's crazy.
I like that. Horror films are a dictionary to. I really like that comment, Lael. That's really, you know, insightful.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's true, and I look, the question, like, you go back to The Purge. Okay, if suddenly all crime, there was no crime for 12 hours, like, and you needed money, would you go rob a bank?
Yeah.
No crime.
Okay.
I mean, I'd be like, I don't want to hurt anybody, but I need $50K.
Yeah,
you know, and I get a shotgun, and there's no repercussions. I could do whatever I want.
Exactly.
And go into a bank. I mean, I might do that if our society said it was okay. Now, I don't want to hurt anybody, but if I needed a quick, I can't. If every year rolled around, I could rob a bank and get 50 or 100K every year on The Purge for 12 hours. I'd be like, I think I'd plan my heist pretty well. You know, I'd go in there and I'd make sure that I walked into that bank like 90 seconds before the purge started.
Yep.
I'd wait. I'd get everybody on the ground. Have I'd Robert De Niro and Val Kilmer that shit in Heat. I'd go in there, take control of the bank, and as soon as the purge hit, then I'd rob it, take the money, and be gone. No one gets hurt. I'm out. And I think that is that immoral? Yes. Is that wrong? Of course. But the government has said, well, you know, the purge. It's the purge, so you could get away. And I think that's the thing. That's what's great about those movies, is it makes you ask yourself. All the great movies make you put yourself in the role of the protagonist. What would I do? If I was Sheriff Brody, would I go out after that shark? Sure.
Right.
You know, if I was Han Solo, would I go back to the Death Star and help Luke blow it up, or would I run off with the treasure or run off with the risk? I have a
question for both of you. Why, the article that we were looking at talks about fairy tales and horror films and how, some of the horror themes are rooted in fairy tales. Why do fairy tales have a horror connection? Why do you think that is?
I think actually to tell you the truth, in my opinion, I think that was basically the writer's intention. Originally, when we see fairy tales, pretty much everybody who knows about the Wizard of Oz knows what originally it was written as. Alice in Wonderland, another thing. When you think about these things, I think it was the original intent, but it was dumbed down once the IP was probably purchased by another, or they were like, nah, we can't go that route. Let's try something totally different. And at the end of the day, people have to get paid. But the original intent, like seriously, the original intent was for it to be, in my opinion, horror driven, because there's too much. I mean, Wizard of Oz, come on, man, flying like horrific. And the thing is, in the original Wizard of Oz the book is frightening.
Yeah.
Like literally frightening. So that's where I'm like, you know what? It was the intent of that writer. And this was something that he probably hears, that writer saw this in their head. This
L.
is
Frank Baum.
L. Frank, exactly. Saw it in their, and they're like, this is the story, the fairy tale that I want to tell. But I think that he probably, presented this and they were like, yeah, nah, we can't do this.
Yeah.
Like we can't do this. Like we got to do something totally different. Like just change the narrative, give it a bit of a spin, make it more of like a musical. Just make it just something where it's just like everyone can gravitate to it. But then, like seriously, even when I was young and I saw The Wizard of Oz, it scared the shit out of me. Certain things, aspects of it scared the hell out of me.
Well,
it's what it is.
Yeah. But I also think that the idea about fairy tales is there's so much in the world that can corrupt children.
Yeah.
And fairy tales deal with, mostly it's allegorical for what horrible things human beings are going to do to kids. I mean, look at our world today. The how many I read about there was a young girl. Not a young girl, she was like 20 or something, and the handyman, she disappeared. And it turns out the handyman that was working at her apartment complex, this is in Florida, killed her.
Mm-hmm.
And just straight up and I mean I think like look at the what I find really terrifying is men and their desires that are unsatisfied. And we now live in a world because of, again, social media and the fact that you have access to all these things. Like the Elliot Rodger, the king of the incel killers, who believed that beautiful women owed him something, and he went up to Santa Barbara and attacked a sorority house and killed people because he believed that he deserved a pretty girl. That to me that's terrifying. That kind of like at least James Gumb, like in Silence of the Lambs, he wanted to become a woman, so he wanted to make himself a woman's suit. Like I can understand that kind of because he wanted to transform. He wanted to become something that he wasn't, and that was a big thing in psychopathy and stuff. If you look at the actual psychology of these kinds of things, and Thomas Harris did a lot of research when he wrote his books. But the idea that there are men out there that they're not socialized in the first place to even know how to talk to anybody. And so they sit at home and stew about what they're not getting in their lives and what they deserve, and they interact with other people and they get radicalized, and that to me is the basis of a horror film. And it goes when you have that kind of, and that's the boogeyman. That's the thing that every woman fears. Instead of a masked killer, It's no, the date, the guy you met on Tinder is really looking to imprison you and
Yes.
and kill you, and the thing is that happens.
Yeah.
So you have to, like, how far are you gonna go? And we live in this society now where you never know who anybody is anymore. People they can have dual identities, and
Yes.
the monsters are due on Maple Street, man. They're here. They're living on the street next to you. They're living in the house, and you might not know it. And
Tom Jr. Jackson says the original ending of The Little Mermaid is really disturbing. And Michael Elliott says nursery crimes. Charlie the Unicorn says flying monkey tamers. And we do have quite a few. We have a few more super chats. Some very generous super chats.
Yes, they're coming in. Mario Lopez, who I saw today. Mario says, 1 or 2, this text is part of a letter that maybe you read before in a Robservations episode. Blade Runner is the movie of my life. I had the opportunity to have seen it with my father, and hold on, and I won't share it. I won't share with you a ritual that my father adopted until he died. Oh, he will share it. Whenever my father had coffee, he would pour the contents of a sugar packet into the coffee and then fold the packet in a ritual he claimed was something similar to what Gaff did with his origami. I copied this ritual until I stopped drinking coffee with sugar.
Wow.
I like that story.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Man.
Yeah, Gaff's doing that.
Yeah.
Brazilian Nerdjitsu sends in a super chat and says, hail from a fellow appreciator of Japanese anime since Voltron. Yeah, I mean, I've been a fan even before that. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
You know, what's amazing about Japanese anime is just the sheer diversity of the stories they tell.
Yes.
I mean, we don't get half of it. We only get the things that they think would appeal to Western audiences. But, man, there's a lot of crazy anime out there.
Yeah,
but I'm a huge fan. I mean, I just watched the first 8 minutes of Space Battleship Yamato 2205, which dropped online. It's not subtitled, but it's awesome.
It's incredible.
So I'm a huge fan. Man sends in a super chat and says, I support your right to your opinion, and I love Robert because you can have a conversation and be civil. Yeah, I mean, that's really the whole point of this channel. Is I think that I don't understand people that can't be civil when you're having a conversation.
I know. And hopefully we'll move in that direction where eventually they will actually be, that level of respect, and, just understanding that, these opinions, they shape the world, man. Seriously. You know what I mean? Like, this is how it is. And, it's okay to have opinions. Even if I don't agree with yours, I can respect I can respect your explanation, and your reasoning, for having that opinion. Like, I think that's just the way. And at the end of the day, we can still shake hands and be friends and still say,
That's
you know
right.
what? Look, I have friends that are Republicans. I have Democratic friends. I have people on both sides of the coin, and I still call them friends, regardless of what they basically believe and their beliefs are. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, you believe that's fine. But as long as we can treat each other with a level of respect, I can say, look, you're still my brother. We can still go out and have a good time. We can still respect each other, and we're not actually aiming to hurt or destroy each other's, integrity or just lives in general. Then that's what it's about, man.
I
we all have opposing views. I mean, that's just the reality of the world. We're individuals and we all have opposing views. And that's what's so great about being alive and being a person and hearing those differen's. We just need to celebrate it and listen and take what we can from it.
Yeah, definitely.
I do feel though that the more a person has a greater experience of the world, and gets out and meets more people, that those people, their ideas tend to be more similar to mine. Like the idea of, because I think a lot of people don't. You need diverse experiences in your life.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that is problematic with Americans, especially lately, is Americans have not. Because we don't. like 65% of Americans or something don't have passports.
Yeah.
and they don't travel. And like the rest of the world, we have a large country where we can't even talk to each other as Americans. we're so divided. But I think, if you live in Europe, you can get on a train and an hour later be in another country that speaks a whole different language, and I think that kind of cross-cultural experience is only beneficial. And I think that we as Americans need more of that. And I think that's part of the problem in the polarization in our country. And I've often thought that wouldn't it be great if, because in other countries people travel.
Yeah.
And if you go up to, like here in California, if you go to Mammoth Mountain, and if you're a skier, and you go to Mammoth in the winter, half the place is got Aussies and Kiwis working there. Because they come for their summer, they travel and they come and they work here at ski resorts because they can. And it's incredible. And like when you travel through Europe, there's nothing more fun than just because you meet people from all over the place all the time. And you realize that we're a lot more similar than we are different.
And do you think that the United States produces a tremendous amount of horror films? Do you think that, horror film from foreign countries, or whether or not people from other countries look at horror the same way we do as Americans? Like, for example, I think Pan's Labyrinth, which, as far as I'm concerned, is like a sci-fi horror film to me, got a lot of awards. Like, it was a big deal when that came out. But there were many people who maybe didn't really look at it as one of their favorites. To me, I thought it was an incredibly, thought-provoking horror film. And, the imagery that was used in there really was sort of like the manifestation of this girl trying to survive during a war situation. Yeah. So, I thought that was very creative, and it was something that she had to do, because if she didn't do that, she would be faced with the cruel reality. At the end of the film, you see the cruel reality of what happened, and she gets killed. Yeah. But, do you think there's a different interpretation of horror abroad versus in the U.S.? And do you think that they also can appreciate a film like The Purge in the way we do?
I think me myself, like I said, I mean, and it goes along with like what Rob was said, being able to, I like to pose myself. I started calling myself like the uncle traveling Matt of my family. You know what I mean? Like, it's a Fraggle Rock reference if it's on. But like I said, I mean, it being exposed to that, I've been able to actually see film from so many different places, and they do value in certain countries, like horror is valued as a very important art form, because it's a way for them to really express certain views. Especially like Japanese horror, to give an example, some of the most, amazing horror that I've ever seen. And I think that it is. They, lately, and I'll say lately, our horror, or if we want to call it horror, has been deemed as more spectacle than an actual story driven. You know what I mean? It's just, you want to actually see, it's all about the paranormal, a slamming door, a creature flying across the room, how amazing that looks, the jump scare. But then, like I said, the story kind of gets lost in that, because then we know what to expect out of these films, where over in the other countries, it becomes an art form. So whereas the story, there's a lot of compassion, there's the horror factor, but at the same time, you're rooted in, you're attaching yourself to that struggle. You're attaching yourself to the struggle to the point where you don't forget about the horror aspect, but it's really tugging on every ounce of emotions that you have in your body, not just the fear. You're looking at love, you're looking at anger, frustration, you're looking at all of these things and as a whole, and it's like, it's an amazing experience when you see it, from different aspects in other countries, how they interpret horror. And it goes with what Rob said. The only way for you to basically see that is to kind of get out, explore, go to other places, and just see and embrace art, especially when it comes to film. Embrace it, and you'll see something totally different. And it might even influence you, even like if you have like inspiring writers, directors, it influences you to do something completely different. So,
Well, like you're saying, we had a wave of J horror come to America in the early aughts, like brought to us by producer Roy Lee, who got the rights to movies like The Ring or The Grudge. And one of the things I liked about J horror that's different is I love the idea that if you piss off your dead ancestors, you know, and or something bad happens in a house, you're not absolved of that. You know, your ancestors are pissed off, and they're going to remain pissed off for a long time, because that's in Asian culture. That's something that's part of their belief system, different than our belief system. And I like that. Like, I like the idea that you don't get, if you've done something wrong and your ancestors are pissed off, you're not gonna come out of this one okay. Yeah, you're in trouble. You know, and we don't. It's just a different mindset. So I like seeing horror from different countries, because you get horror is so culturally based as well. What is wrong in one country isn't necessarily wrong in another. And you know, there's a one of my favorite Japanese horror films of that period is a movie called Pulse, or Kyaro, that was directed by Kyushu Kurosawa, and it's this existential horror film where people just they have existential dread, and they literally get sucked into this. They disappear into their thing, you know, and it's just, I'd never seen a movie like that before, and it really casts a spell. And I love that film. I don't think that movie ever would have been made in America, and then they did try and remake it in America, and it's just not very good, because it doesn't have that strange existential dread that the Japanese were able to imbue into that Kurosawa could put in that story, you know, and that's one of the things I like about foreign horror. And you know, Guillermo del Toro, when he made Pan's Labyrinth, he brings more of that Mexican sensibility with him, the idea of the Day of the Dead and all of that. I mean, it gives it something different. And I think our horror is a little bit more straightforward. You know, now what's funny to me is that Americans, we love our ghost stories. We love whether it's Malignant or Insidious or what James Wan does, The Conjuring. There's so many ghost stories now, and before then it was home invasions like The Strangers or something. People just come to your house and torture you for
don't
whatever.
Breathe. I guess maybe don't breathe.
I mean, all that stuff, and it's. But we don't have as much like Hellraiser was sort of this uniquely British, because it was Clive Barker. I don't know if an American would have ever made Hellraiser.
No, I don't think so. I don't think they would have made it.
The psychosexual or even David Cronenberg's early body horror stuff. The reason I love Cronenberg's body horror, whether it's They Came From Within or Shivers, The Brood, which is a fantastic movie, Rabid. I love the idea that our bodies, I mean, from a horror perspective, we're creatures of spirit and soul or whatever, but we're trapped in these fleshy sacks that at some point, either through age or through cancer, our bodies are going to kill our spirits, our souls. They're going to send us on our merry way, either through old age or something horrible. And I love that David Cronenberg's movies would tap into that, but they would do it in a weird, fantastical way. Like in The Brood, for instance, there's a doctor who has this treatment called psychoplasmics, where you take your rage and you're able to externalize it as giant cancers on your body. And that's how you literally, you expel your emotional trauma through horrible physical deformity and stuff. You're literally, and this woman uses her own rage to create, she's literally growing these humanoid things on the exterior of her body that do her bidding. And I mean, that's such a bizarre, weird idea, but it works really well. I mean, The Brood's one of my favorite horror movies, but I mean, that, I don't know if an American would have come up with that. A mild-mannered Canadian had to dream that shit up. and but again, great horror.
Yeah.
Yes, and Jason Webster says J-horror delves into the struggle between the opposites of traditional values and modern sensibility. And Cinema Gulp says jump scares are an art form if done right.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. By the way, Man says that Swamp Thing is a horror show for me. I love Swamp, especially the Alan Moore version of Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
That the comics, some of the greatest comics ever written, is Alan Moore's Swamp Thing.
That season, this lad, that first season of Swamp Thing, I don't know why it wasn't as, it was amazing. Like
they killed it before it was even done
before it was even done. Yeah, I mean, that was dumb.
It was really dumb. Dos Gecko says, makes me sad that John Carpenter just kind of stopped. I really miss his filmmaking voice. I do too. I'm a huge, Lael's talked about The Fog. The Fog is such a great movie.
Yes,
I mean, talk about atmosphere and, like you were saying, the sins of the past coming back to bite you in the ass. And that movie's genuinely creepy and scary. And what an atmosphere it spins, whether it's The Fog or just being on the beach.
Yes.
Any
film that could basically make me that film made me not want to be the last person coming upstairs at night when it's time to go to bed. Like literally, like that's just any film that can make me feel that way, then you've done a great, amazing job. Like The Fog is always going to be like one of my top time greatest horror films of all time. Like literally it is.
Yeah. No, I absolutely. Here's when Man said that we've gone way too political. Laugh out loud. I will still watch you tomorrow. Blows us a kiss. I'm sorry. I mean, I can't. To me, I mean, I don't like if we're discussing, for instance, climate change or the environment. I don't think it's necessarily political to make that analogy about keeping your kitchen 10% dirty. I don't see that as a political statement. Because it is, to me, would you do that? Is it political to want to keep your environment clean? I mean, I think it's odd that we because something's outside, we think that we can dump our refuse there. It's bizarre to me. I don't see that as a political issue.
Nah,
Rick's Star Wars comic book and video says that the best horrors are from directors who know how to, I guess, direct fantasy. I think that's what he's saying in his comments.
I think that's, look, to me it comes back to verisimilitude. Like what we talked about last night, having William Friedkin make you believe in The Exorcist. Yeah. And I think that's a really hard thing to do. I think you have to understand, how do you create a reality even within whatever you're trying to do. One of the things about, I think that the reason a lot of people watch the original Halloween and think it's this bloodless, almost quaint story. But the thing about Halloween is it's so realistic. It's set and it's not histrionic. I mean, there's one moment where Michael Myers kills Bob, PJ Soul's boyfriend, and picks him up and drives a knife and pins him to the wall. And there's this great moment and where Michael Myers just looks at this dead person that he just killed, but there's this moment where you linger on it and you're like, oh my God, what is he even thinking? He's just looking like dispassionately, like whatever. And there's something really creepy about that. Really creepy.
I mean, when you're thinking about Michael Myers, like you're thinking about a tormented soul. Like the thing is, there is always a moment when you're watching Halloween and you watch Michael. It's like you have a slither of compassion, because you know that there is a reason that he believes he has to do this, like that he's doing this. And it's something like, we all say, this guy needs help, but then he does something so effed up. You're like, nah, kill him. Just kill him. Just kill him. Because it just like, there's no reasoning there. But I mean, that's how, like, just the physicality, the physical attributes of the person who's playing that role, like it's been some of the most amazing experiences, because you're getting them in the mind of a psycho killer who's almost damn near superhuman. You know what I mean? Like you can't, Like no matter what, like it's like he's completely turned his mind off of any type of physical pain. Nothing makes him feel anything because he has a purpose and he's driven by that purpose to kill. You know what I mean? So yeah, yeah, Halloween, man. The original.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stubble McShave says all the cautionary tales have been Disney-fied.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, especially like the Grimm's fairy tales and all that. It's true because they've all been co-opted and turned into very palatable stories, like Hansel and Gretel and that. So
yeah.
And we have more super chats, Robert.
Oh, we have a lot. Lynch Designed says some of my favorite people right here. It's very generous super chat. Thank you, Lynch.
Thank you. Thank you.
Some of my favorite people right here. You guys are amazing. And I try and catch all the screams. Lael, you are the man. Rob, are you excited for Star Blazers 2205 coming out at the end of the month? Am I? I can't. I love it so much. I can't wait. I am bummed out though that I just like with 2202, they're not putting out the Blu-rays in Japan that have English subtitles like they did for $21.99. As beautiful as always. I love you guys. Well, Lynch, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say.
Thank you. Has fans.
Yes.
Thank you.
But I am deliriously excited for 2205. I can't wait because it's partly based on Be Forever Yamato, which I love that movie so much, so I can't wait to see it.
Yes.
Like you said, richest Star Wars comic book and video game sent in a super chat.
Yes.
He says, as a horror director, I got to say, rock on. Well, thank you for that. Paul says the best modern horror. Paul from Twin Flicks says the best modern horror film I've seen recently is Haunt, written and directed by the writers of A Quiet Place 1 and 2 and produced by Eli Roth. It was very well made. You care about each character and a good story. It is intense and scary.
Ooh.
Well, yes. Haunt is supposed to be good. I haven't seen it. I think I have that for Dieter Bastian right back here.
Have you seen it, Lael?
No, not yet. Not yet. But I will watch it. I
haven't seen it either. So
I've just actually finished. There's a show that actually has been on a miniseries that's been on Netflix. Not even a miniseries because I think this was the second season. I can't wait for the third. I don't know if you've seen it, Black Summer on Netflix.
Oh,
yes.
I
love my God. I love that show.
So good.
I've been addicted to it since the first. It's
perfect.
I wanted to see. It's the perfect what I wanted to see. It's right there in front of me. Like seriously, and I'll watch it over and over again, and I'll go back and watch the season again. That's how great it is. Literally.
I mean, one thing we can learn from is you have to be in incredible shape.
And run, yes. You have to run. That's all you have to know. How you have to run. You have to be. I mean, you know what? You have to run, and you have to be experienced in parkour.
And yet, despite the fact that it does have a lot of running, you don't get tired of it. Like you just are eager to see what's going to happen next. I mean, it keeps you so engaged. It's perfect. I like
how it's and I love how it's the vantage points, how it's told from different vantage points, and it connects everything together. That is brilliant to me. It is so brilliant.
It's so good.
Latoya T says, sends in a super chat and says, for a reference to one of my favorite movies, Heat.
Yeah.
Oh man! By the way, I've got a Heat 2-pack, 12-inch figure, 6 scale 2-pack for Heat. With Neil McCauley and the De Niro and Al Pacino. I had to get that.
Yes.
I had to get that. So Heat is one of the great movies. I can't wait to get that on 4K.
Yes.
Because it's great, and it has one of the great gun battles, shootouts in any movie ever. In the streets of downtown LA. Every time I watch it, I'm just like, I love this so much.
Yeah.
It's just it's
on point, man. Like it's
just out there. You can pull it out of the sky.
Yeah, exactly.
Tom Noonan in Heat is great.
Definitely.
I love Heat. Lynch Design comes back. Oh, this is a good question. Lynch Design comes back and says, what are your thoughts about the Friday the 13th rights going back to its creator? Do you think Disney and Marvel are having an oh crap, what if moment? Oh, yes, I do. Now, for those of you, let me read this article. For those of you who, let me read the article first. This has something to do with what Marvel's got going on right now, and it's really, really interesting. So, this was published on Screen Rant by Richard Fink 3 days ago. Friday the 13th rights go to original writer after lawsuit. I'm just going to read this quick. Friday the 13th screenwriter Victor Miller has won the rights to the original film in a massive lawsuit. Miller wrote the original Friday the 13th back in 1980, and the film became a massive hit and spawned a multimedia franchise. The 12 Friday the 13th films have grossed a combined worldwide box office of a total of $468.24 million and even more off merchandise over the years. Despite all that, a massive lawsuit has held up the rights to the film franchise for the last 5 years. In 2016, Victor Miller filed a lawsuit against Friday the 13th producer Sean S. Cunningham for the rights. He also directed the first movie. For the rights to the franchise. Cunningham tried to get the lawsuit dismissed, as he claimed Miller wrote the script on a work-for-hire basis and had no rights to the property. But in 2018, the courts ruled in favor of Miller. Cunningham appealed the ruling, and the case has been ongoing ever since, which has stalled development on any future Friday the 13th projects, from games to movies, making it the longest gap between entries in the franchise since 2009's Platinum Dunes reboot. According to the Hollywood Reporter, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of Miller and rejected the claim that he was an independent contractor on a work-for-hire job when he wrote the script, and is therefore entitled to authorship. Miller will reclaim the domestic rights to the franchise. However, Sean S. Cunningham still retains the foreign rights to the franchise, as well as intellectual property derived from the Friday the 13th sequels, including possibly the adult form of Jason, who didn't appear until Friday the 13th Part 2, and the iconic hockey mask associated with him didn't appear until Part 3. This leaves the future of the Friday the 13th franchise up in the air. Even before the lawsuit, the producers had a hard time getting a new film off the ground, despite the box office success of the 2009 reboot. The last word on the film was that LeBron James was in talks to produce a new entry in the franchise. However, with the lawsuit now possibly splitting the rights up, it could mean a much longer time until any new film in the franchise is released. The lawsuit is also a major win for attorney Mark Toberoff, who is currently representing the 5 estate members in a lawsuit with Marvel over the rights to various characters in a similar copyright dispute over what is deemed work for hire. That case will be a much larger battle for Toberoff given Disney's massive pockets. The Friday the 13th lawsuit could set a precedent for a similar film case, though, like the lawsuit from the writers of the 1987 Predator movie suing Disney for the rights of that character. Now, this is a huge victory in my mind for creators' rights because, look, I would say that Miller was, in fact, he was it was work for hire, but he basically made it up. Like it was his stuff,
his
and
vehicle,
And was he a member of the Writers Guild? There's all kinds of things that come into play. And I think the same is true of like when you go to work for Marvel, the idea is if it's work for hire, they just own everything that you write. But that's not really correct. And there's been other precedent, like when Blade came out, Marv Wolfman went and said, look, I created this character. You know, regardless, I might have been working for you at the time, I still created this character. And so the idea of work for hire, what's unfortunate is, I always say on this channel, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. And the problem is when people were writing these characters back in the day, they didn't know that these films, you never know if something's going to be a hit. You know, when you're working on comic books, you're writing comic books. Nobody knew that 40 or 50 years later, somebody's going to make a movie that makes $3 billion worldwide with all these characters.
Right.
Or that, like Black Panther or Captain Marvel's going to gross $1 billion. And so it's rough, but it could mean with Marvel trying to get the rights back to all, because what happens, our copyright system allows the rights to revert back after a certain amount of time to the people that originally created the work.
Yeah.
They and their heirs get the copyright back. So a company like Disney's like, no, they've been subverting copyright law for a long time because they don't want to lose the rights to Mickey Mouse. So they always try and change copyright law. But the whole point of copyright law is ultimately how long should something be owned by a corporation.
Yeah.
So
this is gonna be interesting, and you know, and the tricky, the crazy part about that is, you know, especially for Disney when it comes to like the Marvel franchise, when it comes to like beloved characters such as Spider-Man, and can you imagine? Can you imagine like if, like, say for instance, if they chose to like take the character and give it the Image. I mean, I'm just saying, like, you know,
Right.
something like that could be done. You know what I mean? Like, you never know, you know, how this could actually play out. And it's interesting because, you know what, the thing is, and I'm just keeping it all the way 100 real. I didn't know anything about, you know, how serious this law is. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I had no idea that this is something that could come into play. And it's like, I always hear, like, you know, well, that's unfair. Like, you know, no, Marvel should, you know, they should have the right to keep it. But at the same time, I also have to look at the creators, and like, especially if they're not getting paid for something that, you know, they've created, if they've been lowballed, you know what I mean? They should have rights too. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just going to be interesting to see how this is going to play out. Like,
yeah, and it is. I mean, and ultimately that's what the problem is. Again, when you have something that's, corporations they're not going to give up money. You can't convince a corporation that's publicly held, like, well, you need to pay out big fees. But I do think that ultimately, while our society doesn't work this way, it should. It's like we talked earlier about people getting their voices. Creators should get what they're worth. You know, they should get a decent payout. You know, Ed Brubaker wrote the Captain America Winter Soldier storyline.
Right.
He created that character. He brought Bucky back and the whole concept of the Winter Soldier. Now, in my mind, yeah, he was working for Marvel, but he's creating something. It's his own creation under that system. If you're going to go then decide to make a movie called Captain America the Winter Soldier, that's Ed Brubaker. And yeah, people would say, well, he didn't create Bucky. No, but he did create something that is so specific to him. You know, he went and he took this character of Bucky and then reinvented him and made him something that only he did. And when he says, well, yeah, I got $5,000 and they didn't even invite me to the premiere, it's like, how much money did that movie make? You know, and it's 5,000. You got to give creators, like, people don't need, you don't have to give somebody $10 million, but you know what? If you make a movie, The Winter Soldier, I mean, $250,000 payment.
And I also think that in the movie, it should say created by, you know, that person. Give them the credit on the line, you know.
Blade does. Blade says created by, like, Marv Wolfman in the opening credits.
Exactly.
You know, and that's the least they can do, because Ed Brubaker did, in fact, create the Winter Soldier. Created that iteration of the character. And if that's the case, then I think that you gotta, under the contract he signed, that isn't the case, so they're just gonna go, well, we don't have to pay him. But you know what, it is kind of the right thing to do. I mean,
you know, sometimes when we hear them say things exactly like what you're saying, Robert, where they say, well, we don't have to do this. And it's kind of like they're going against, they know that they should be doing it, but even their statement sometimes almost implies that they don't want to pay the artist. It's almost as if they're being defiant in a way.
Oh, and you're absolutely right. They don't. They absolutely are. And I get it. No.
I'm sorry, Charlie the Unicorn says it's going to be challenged in a circuit court and ultimately in Supreme Court, so no new.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll probably get fought. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. But the Friday the 13th case is a really interesting case because if Victor Miller, he now has been awarded back the rights to the original Friday the 13th, but as every Friday the 13th fan knows, yes, Jason Voorhees doesn't show up until the end, and the killer that we know, it's still a derivative work. You can't then say, well, I own the rights to Friday the 13th Part 2 and 3. Well, yeah, but they wouldn't exist without Friday the 13th 1.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be really interesting. How are they going to move forward with that? And that the same thing could be true of what happens with these Marvel comics. If the copyright reverts back, like Spider-Man to the Ditko estate or Stan Lee's whatever, what's going to happen? I mean, I don't know. But then what will happen is then Disney will have to pay. We'll go back and what is the number to secure this character?
What do you want? What do you want? What do we have to pay to actually have this character? What is it? Now let's talk numbers. Let's crunch these numbers, and something that probably they should have thought about in the very beginning. They're going to go back and do now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And it would be worth it. And even if they had to pay $25 million, for Spider-Man, then they secure the rights to Spider-Man for all time, forever. That's a small price to pay, isn't it? When the last Spider-Man movie grossed $1 billion, $25 million to secure that character forever, all the merchandising, the video game rights, whatever, it'll pay for itself.
Yeah, definitely.
And Lance Bergsven says, hi, Rob. I know you were excited for the French body horror film Titane that just came out.
Yes.
Have you got a chance to watch it? I have not. It was at Beyond Fest. I am dying. I said that was my number one most awaited movie.
Yes.
Maybe I'll go see it tomorrow night. I can't wait to see it. Everyone's talked about it, how bonkers it is. I'm dying to see it. I love Julia Dutournau's first movie, Raw, and I can't wait to see this film.
I'm excited for it too. If I could make films, I'd want to make films like that.
Yeah.
It's just so wonderful to see productions like this and something just so outside of the box. And I'm excited for it too. We all need to see it and come back on here and talk about it at length.
Oh yeah, we should.
Yeah.
Lance goes on to say, off topic, but I've been going back and watching Whining About Movies lately. And you convinced me to watch Once Upon a Time in the West, and I loved it. Oh, I love hearing when people say that. Thank you for introducing me to an amazing film. Elizabeth and I are going to bring that back. We're going to bring Whining About Movies back. Lael, my girlfriend and I did a show. We did about 150 episodes of a show called Whining About Movies, where we would share a bottle of wine and talk about a movie that we watched. We'd watch a movie, and it was like couples movie night, and people really liked it. And we haven't done it in a while because of school and her school, but we got to bring it back. But Lance, thanks for the kind words, because it's so fun. I love it when people watch movies they haven't seen because of whining. That's my favorite thing, because of whining about movies.
Yeah.
Sub McShave says, when do you think Disney will make the Hans Christian Andersen, the little match girl, into a Disney princess? If you don't know this, quote, uplifting story, look it up and imagine the Disney version of it. I have vague memories of the Little Match Girl, so I will have to look that up, Stubble. I don't. I have to look that up, but I don't know. I'm sure Disney will do it. Pod Racing Palpatine says, hello, everyone. I'm just relaxing here with tea and toast, getting ready to fulfill your request that I go see Bond at London's Leicester Square tomorrow. Sorry I couldn't do opening day, but life finds a way. That's where I saw Skyfall at the Odeon in Leicester Square. You'll have to report back and tell me what you think.
Yes.
Lance Bergsvin goes on to say, I love Dave, and I hope to see him back soon. He'll be back next week. But I am totally digging the combo of and Lael these last couple days. Great discussions, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I love being here.
Yeah, I love having Lael here.
It's so much fun.
Love being here.
And then Rich's Star Wars comic book and video game sends in a super chat and says, watch Bed of the Dead. I have friends in that film. It's a horror film.
Bed of
I'd
the
watch
Dead.
that.
Now,
Bed of the Dead.
Rich's comic book, he said that he's the one who directs horror films, right? Did he say that earlier?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Bed of the Dead.
We will watch it.
I'm definitely watching it. Now that, Bed of the Dead. I will watch it.
That was like my sex life in college.
Because we have a, like I said, we have a upcoming horror fest. A friend of mine, like Vincent Dunn, you actually see him on comic books comic talk with friends on Monday. He always puts together what we call a horror fest, and he'll actually have like one night we go over his house. He has it on a big screen surround sound, and we just watch nothing. But the thing is, he picks films, and he strategically picks films that hardly anyone has ever heard before, and they're artistically creative. And when you watch it, it's like, what the hell? But he picks it where they have a narrative, a running theme into the very end. So I love that. So
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of great horror out there that a lot of people haven't seen.
Yeah.
And it's always good to see, to experience that stuff, because it's great.
Yeah.
So we're caught up in the super chats, but there is something that I wanted to read a third quote from that article from Film School Rejects. And this one comes from Meredith Borders. For me, the best horror strikes straight to a dark, thrilling place in my heart. A sort of cozy scariness, both a safe and unsafe place that reminds me of hiding behind the couch while my big cousin watched A Nightmare on Elm Street, or staying up late to watch Poltergeist on TV after my parents went to sleep, eating peanut butter straight out of the jar. It feels old and new in that way, hitting both the nostalgic and adventurous parts of my brain. Great horror always makes me feel 8 years old again, like I'm getting away with watching something I shouldn't be watching, and I love that feeling. That's Meredith Borders who said that.
So is horror inevitably a guilty pleasure? Is it? If you're watching something you shouldn't be seeing, is it a guilty pleasure?
I wouldn't call it a guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
Because some horror, I think about one of my favorite horror movies is Rosemary's Baby, the original Rosemary's Baby. And that isn't necessarily something that I shouldn't be watching, because it's almost a drama. So it's about extreme paranoia, and this woman, is she or is she not being preyed upon by a coven of witches that her husband is now in league with, including the devil. Yeah. And when you watch it, if you've never seen Rosemary's Baby, it's one of my favorite movies, and it's just, you'll never date an actor after you watch that movie, I'll tell you that.
I don't know. To call it a guilt, no. I mean, I wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't call it a guilty pleasure. I mean, because it's like, especially, it's like it's because there's always like that secret gem of a film that you'll actually find that just connects to you in such a way that it's like, wow, like I can't. It's horror is like, it's like one of those things like a food that you enjoyed for so long, you might step away from it because it does something horribly to your body, but it's just like, it tastes so good, I gotta go back. I gotta go back, I need it again, you know what I mean? So yeah, definitely.
I mean, I think there are guilty pleasure horror movies, but I don't think the genre is guilty.
Yeah.
I'm not, my love of horror films is not, I don't feel horror films are guilty pleasures in and of themselves, but there are definitely horror films that I have that I like that are in fact guilty pleasures, I think.
Yeah. There are some films that, like, for instance, there's one, what would be my guilty pleasure horror film?
Well, I can think of one that I kind of liked called The Autopsy of Jane Doe.
That movie rules, though.
And in the film, as you obviously know, what kind of makes it a guilty pleasure, because I'll just watch this all day. The character, the main, I guess one of the main characters, is on an autopsy table, completely unclothed.
Yep, the
completely
whole
nude.
time.
Yeah.
But it's not like, it's a beautiful nudity as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
It's not degrading in any way. It's an autopsy table. This is they're in the process of performing an autopsy. And while it's true that they do the normal things like making incisions in the body, actually the process of doing that and being aware in the film of the repercussions of this character that they are doing the autopsy on is even more intriguing. Realizing what's going on, an autopsy on this particular character. So I love that film. It's so fantastic when they find her body in this sort of mound of dirt, but her body looks perfect.
Yeah.
Like you can see her skin against the soil and the ground. And of course, it's very perplexing if you're a medical examiner or someone going to a site where you find a body. They don't look like that when you find them. So, that was just quite, I thought that was such a brilliant shot for the director to use, because it told you right away that something's a little different something's going to be different about this autopsy.
That movie is brilliant.
Yeah.
It is a brilliantly directed, brilliantly conceived, nasty slice of horror. I love that film.
Yeah.
It is so beautifully made. And the premise is great. It's scary. People will say, what movie is scary? Now, it's funny because there's people that can't buy into things, but The Autopsy of Jane Doe is a really scary movie.
Yeah.
And it feels very independent film-ish. Like
Yes.
it feels like it was made by, that's how it feels. I don't know is it, Robert? Is it an independent film or is it?
Yeah, no, it was done independently. I mean, I don't know. It was put out by, I want to say like IFC put it out on.
It's certainly not, I'm not saying it's bad for that reason. I like it for that reason. There's something very appealing about it. And the father and son in the story, that's also very good. Like like they're both looking at this body, and I'm wondering, what are they thinking? It's just so good. And yes, I did stare at this woman's body through the whole thing. Like you're supposed to look at it.
Yeah, and
so,
it's quite creepy because it's so, like you said, it's beautiful, and then the stuff that happens in the movie is great. I mean, it's the guy, the Oli, I forget how you pronounce his last name because it's like Norwegian or something. He's directing The Last Voyage of the Demeter, and the Demeter is the ship that brought Dracula to America from Europe. And I think it's an Amblin movie, like Steven Spielberg's Amblin is producing that, and I think they just wrapped that, so that'll be cool to see.
Speaking of that, one of my because I was just thinking about it, like I think one of my guilty pleasure horror, it's actually like a horror science fiction film to me. And it was based off of actually I bought the book. It was actually called Space Vampires by Colin Wilson, and that was Life Force. Yo, that movie, it is like, if you watch it now, you'll be like, how the hell, what was I thinking? But it was amazing. Like it was an amazing presentation of a book, translated to film, of a female or a vampire, like that takes the form of this beautiful female who just, completely, mesmerizes men and just like that.
And she's also naked the whole movie.
Yeah.
Wandering around. I worked for Shout Factory. I did I interviewed Toby Hooper, who directed Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He directed the film. Yeah. And we recorded his audio commentary.
Okay.
So, and on the disc, there's two different versions of Life Force. There's the international version, which is like 20 minutes longer, and then there's the Life Force is bonkers, but I like Life Force.
I thought it was beautiful. I love Life Force. Film.
I loved it. The way the story was told, like just the pandemonium that was happening around the city around that time.
I know.
It was just like amazing. But I was like, wow, as a kid, like watching it, I'm like, I know I'm not supposed to be watching this film, but I'm saying, like, still, like, it was just so amazing. And like, even that was the reason why watching that film, actually forced me to buy the book and read it. You know what I mean? Because I wanted to read the book to kind of see where it was derived from. And the book is amazing. I still have it.
Yep.
But yeah, love it. Love it.
You know what's interesting about Life Force? Patrick Stewart has his first on-screen kiss, but it's with a dude.
Yeah.
Because he's it's the
been
Life
taken
Force.
over by the
yeah.
And you know what? Patrick Stewart does not age. Like, what? He looks the same in every film. And the guy's amazing. But yeah, I remember that scene. Like, it was,
Yeah, no, he always laughs about that. But yeah. Lynch Design comes back and says, when I think about my childhood, I sometimes think about my poor movie choices. Megaforce, seen it 5 times in the theater. Space Hunter and the Forbidden Zone. Time Rider and The Wraith. Do you remember any of these, bro?
Oh, The Wraith.
I saw them all in the theater when they first came out. All of them.
Every last one of those films. So Lynch, you're not alone, bro. Stop that.
And by the way, don't forget Space Hunter, Adventures in the Forbidden Zone came out in 3D in 1983, along with Friday the 13th 3D and Metal Storm, The Destruction of Jared Sin in 3D, and Jaws 3D. That was the big 3D craze back then in Space Hunter. Michael Ironside played the Overdog, the villain in that movie.
Yeah.
Those, Time Rider is actually pretty good. Time Rider: The Adventures of Lyle Swan. That's starring Fred Ward, who should have played Wolverine, but he was too old by the time. And then The Wraith, that just came out on Blu-ray.
I love The Wraith.
The Wraith got the lovely Sherilyn Fenn in that movie.
Yeah.
From Two Moon Junction. But I now what about, like, as you get older, do horror films change for you? Do you watch them less and less? Do you have less of a need to watch? Like, I don't watch slasher movies much anymore because there's nothing to them. There's I like the Nightmare on Elm Street films because there's a fantasy psychological component, but I don't like Halloween Kills is opening this week, and that's fine, but it's the 30 years or 40 years later, it's the official sequel to the original Halloween as opposed to the other movies. But I just don't, slashers, there's nothing psychological really about running away from the boogeyman that has any, it doesn't hold any fascination for me anymore.
Yeah.
Because I want more. Do you guys feel that way at all?
Well, for me, Hellraiser has changed quite a bit for me. Like the idea behind Hellraiser and the notion of hypocrisy and, kind of like our society, our modern society and hypocrisy, where, especially in regards to sex and sexuality, because it's addressed in Hellraiser.
Right.
So, the idea of, let's say, prudish behavior, overly prudish behavior in the United States versus, what people actually desire, which doesn't reflect the overly prudish behavior or the fear of sexuality or the fear of nudity or the fear of seeing love scenes between anybody other than a man and a woman. All of those elements of shying away from sexuality, I think, are addressed in Hellraiser. Yeah. And, I really like that. And I think it's very important because Hellraiser acknowledges that people have emotions and desires. And, while things, go to hell, it's literally, I like that they even are addressing it because, when you repress that side, you don't have to act on it, but when you repress it or pretend like it doesn't exist, it's like you're eliminating, a certain part of humanity. So for me, Hellraiser feels different, and I also feel differently about The Exorcist many years later. And I think the reason why I feel differently about The Exorcist is because, honestly, my interpretation of the Catholic faith for me has changed through the years. And I wasn't expecting that. And it has, and as that perception of the faith has changed, my perception of The Exorcist has changed. And I've come to appreciate people who are willing, and I know this is not really related, but I've come to appreciate people who decide to devote their life to a religion, regardless of faith, but, a person who takes that path and what it means in the repercussions for them. which also has made me, it's not a horror film, but it's made me appreciate Benedetta more. And I've spoken about this. I like the idea of Benedetta so much because you have these women who have devoted their lives to a faith, and they're still human beings. And I don't think we often look at them as human beings with desires and fears and concerns. And, those don't go away just because you decide that you're going to take an oath and dedicate your life to a faith. So I thought that making that film, they were trying to look at the human side of these women, and that they do have these desires, and we need to acknowledge them as human beings. So I think that these horror films, the horror films as well as Benedetta, do that. They kind of go into that area that people may be repressing or don't want to face, that actually exist in people, and it's become even more appealing to me. So that's the change that's happened for me.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the evolution. It's how horror films have quickly evolved. It's become more of a way to really, not to say that the horror films from our era, our time, haven't been artistically creative. I think now they're explored totally differently. Like for instance, I'll give you an example. Going to see the most recent adaptation of Candyman. A lot of people didn't. I heard there were it was mixed about it. I loved it. I loved it so much because of just the narrative behind it, where it came from, and just visually how it was. It was visually astonishing. You know what I mean? I loved it from the opening, credits. Just seeing how the infrastructure of different buildings in Chicago were shot upside down, and mirroring each other, like you were looking through a mirror. I love that. And I think that it allowed me to kind of see how my taste for horror films have evolved. You know what I mean? I still have love for a lot of the films that we've seen throughout our time, throughout the ages. But now I just look at them from a totally different way, because I can always get something from it. I'm always looking for what the message is in the film. Yes, I'll always gravitate to the horror aspect of it first. When we were young, we went to the movies to see these things. You take your girlfriend to go see this film. You were just excited that when the jump scare happened, she jumped on you, and it was like, yeah, tonight's is going down. But it was just now that I'm really able to to look at the film, and really understand and embrace the message, or what the director or the writer was trying to convey, when they give us these films. And I like that aspect, as the simple fact that with all genres of films, there's always evolution. And that's what keeps these things going. It keeps these films going, and our love for it keeps it going. And then on top of that, it allows a new audience to go back and appreciate some of the films that came on during our time. And they could be like, wow, that was amazing. It might not have been, you might have had more practical props and stuff like that, but it was still amazing. So, I mean, everything kind of ties itself together. So my love for horror is going to always be there. I'm an October baby, so come on.
Yeah, I think that you make a lot of good points. The obviously the fears of the time are always reflected in the horror movies that are getting made to a certain extent, and it's the anxieties people feel, where they're at in their lives. I think that's always a big part of what happens in horror. I'm gonna be curious to see the horror movies that are made 5 years from now.
Yeah,
And, the wake of COVID and where we're gonna go after that. And it's going to be interesting to see what our lives are going to be like in 5 years. Yeah. Because the funny thing about this whole COVID situation is there's so many different takes. Is it the beginning of the Great Reset, and are we all being manipulated by a cabal of the world government that's closing us all down? Is it going to be that? Or is it going to be something else? Or all of our fears and all of our which is what I love about horror. I love, you can judge a civilization by the horror movies that are getting made and at what time they're getting made. So
yeah,
I find that interesting. Lynch Design comes back and says, when mentioned Iron Eagle last time, it got me thinking how Queen was a big part of that film, just like Flash Gordon. Their soundtracks were sick, and Highlander too.
Yes.
Highlander, that is great. Queen, the fact that Queen's in Iron Eagle and Flash Gordon and Highlander. I mean, I think Iron Eagle was around the same time as Highlander. I think it was Iron Eagle was 87 maybe. Queen was definitely out there scoring movies then.
And Freddie Mercury was a huge science fiction fan. A lot of people didn't really. I mean, he's a huge science fiction fan. You know what I mean? A lot of of his writing came from, just exploring certain films and aspects of just character driven films. So shout out to the man himself.
I have him right over there in 6 scale.
Yeah.
There he is. Can't see him, but he's there. Ragnarok Star says, I'm just curious if any of you have ever seen The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane. Yes, I have.
Yes.
Phenomenal performance from Jodie Foster at just age 13. Love the themes on maturity and isolation and how Jodie will do anything to keep her autonomy from prying adults who want to control her. Yeah, that was one of those movies where when I was a kid, nobody would let me see it because it was like R-rated, and you could see it was that and Audrey Rose, and I'm like, what happens? What's going on? And there were books, and I finally saw it, and it was more of a drama than the horror movie I imagined it would be, but it is all about those things, and I love that movie. But man, that's a movie I should get. I haven't seen that movie in ages. I don't know if it's on Blu-ray. It's good. Lance Bergsman goes on to say, when it comes to horror, I'm all about atmosphere. David Eggers, oh, you mean Robert Eggers. David Eggers is the author. Robert Eggers has become my recent favorite director for the genre for this reason. The Witch and The Lighthouse hit that note perfectly. I'm a huge fan. Man, I loved The Witch. Love The Witch. And The Lighthouse is quite good, too. The Witch is one of the atmosphere in that movie. He does such, like he did with The Lighthouse, he builds such atmosphere, and it's great. I mean, that's really hard. The Witch, that's really hard. I mean, Black Phillip, the goat. Come on, you gotta love Black Phillip.
Yeah, definitely. You have to.
Stubble McShave says, I missed the beginning of the show. You might have mentioned that Avery Brooks turned 73 yesterday. Speaking of Hawk.
Speaking of Hawk, my man.
Cisco was the best dad on TV and a great commander and captain. He was the most badass captain in Star Trek. I loved his later episodes with Jake. Yep, I agree 100%. One of the great father-son portrayals in television history. And the fact he was a single black father in the 90s that had a great relationship with his son, that was like almost revolutionary on TV at the time.
Yeah, yes.
And it's great. It's great. I just retweeted an article about it was the greatest portrayal of a father-son relationship in television history.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was great.
Definitely. That's what I think was amazing about the show itself was just him having to navigate not only just being that person that is part of keeping so many different alien species in order on not, it's not a vessel. I would actually want to say it's just like a star base or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And at the same time, you're a parent. It's like, damn, like all of that is this. Oh, it's an influx of just so much, but we're talking about Hawk.
I mean, you gotta love him.
You gotta love him, bro. Avery Brooks.
Here's the late night bar is closing, and 200 Watt Studio is he's gonna send some sweet nothings, I think, to someone on the show. 200 Watt Studio says, Rob, what is the opposite of body horror? Maybe body delight, because encapsulates it with her delightful cadence and smile and her warm personality. What I'm trying to say is it's nice to see you.
Thank you, 200 Watt Studio. It's nice to see you too. And thank you for the compliments and the generosity. And thank you for coming tonight. And, thank you.
Remember, wants to be a mom. Just saying, you sweet talker, you 200-watt studio. I see what you did there.
That was super smooth. I like that.
Well, that was good. But the you know, it's true though. The opposite of body horror, body delight. I mean, isn't that what human sexuality really is all about when it comes down to is you know, I always talk about body horror in the sense that our bodies will revolt against the soul and the spirit that is inside of our bodies. Give sustenance to the spiritual and the soul that we have, and if we don't have our bodies, we will die. And I guess body delight, you know, if you really think about it, like, isn't that what sexuality is? You're going to you find a partner and you both try to achieve that physical release, the greatest pleasure. So on one hand, your body is going to kill you eventually through cancer or old age or something. But if before that happens, you want the ultimate, the way that your mind, your spirit, and everything is engaged with that physical release, the very thing that will kill you eventually also provides you with such amazing pleasure.
Exactly.
And I think that's interesting. I guess I never thought about that. I mean, could there be a horror genre with body delight? I guess there's a movie called Society that was directed by Brian Usna that Screaming Mad George did the effects. It's about all these people in Beverly Hills, these families in Beverly Hills that aren't quite what they seem. And at the end, it has one of the strangest orgy sequences in cinema history, if you've ever seen it. I bet I can find a picture of it on the internet. And it's not something. Let's see. Let's see. Society Climax. I should say Society Film Climax. See if it'll show any pictures. Society, one of cinema's greatest finales. It certainly is. Let me see if I can find an image, because oh yeah, there is an image of the final. I don't know, I'm kind of ruining it if I show this, but let's see, this doesn't really convey how weird it really is. Let me see if I can find more. Oh yeah, this'll give you a example. So in Society, the rich people that are that make up this society, it turns out that their bodies are malleable, like very malleable, and it gets very, very weird at the end of the film. But they do think Screaming Mad George did some crazy stuff. So here I will show these two shots. They're a little dark, but this one's tongue in cheek. So this one is you see where a person's anus would be. It's a face, and so in the film, at the end of the movie, your bodies are completely malleable. Here's a shot. I mean, this doesn't do it really real justice, but people's bodies are changing and morphing, and it like in The Thing, and but yet it's played tongue in cheek, and it is it is quite the craziness, and Screaming Mad George, the effects artist, did the effects in Society, and I guess that would be body delight. But I've always found that sort of really interesting. Like, if you think about, like, it would be great. I think we need eroticism and sexuality back in horror films more, because we don't, and true eroticism. We talked about that on the show before. We don't have eroticism anymore, you know, because people can just go watch Pornhub or whatever, and there's no eroticism, like, because with eroticism there's a yearning to it. You know, it's not anybody can jump into the act, but where's the erotic power of, like, the seduction? The whole vampire mythology is you're being seduced. You know, the power of a vampire is to look into your eyes and ensorcel you, you know, and take you maybe against your will, and that's part of it, is that you're being seduced by dark forces, and those dark forces are promising you what the light isn't going to bring you. And I miss that.
there's nowadays there's nothing left to the imagination anymore. It's nothing where it's like they just rather give it to you right up front until you just actually imagine what goes on beyond the closed doors. Like imagining like the physical form, the physical connection between two individuals and what they do is like, films, from, our era, like you would always see the act begin, but then you would always see the after effects. So it was like, oh, like the mystery was like, what did they do? Like what type of, but now it's just like, all right, we're just going to give it to you, boom, right then and there. And then it's done. You know what I mean? So yeah, I again, we just live in different times, Rob.
Yeah, well, but I used to love, like, you'd watch Hammer horror films, and like when the handsome vampire would come out, and the act of the fangs penetrating the flesh of a neck, that was the sexual act, and you'd see the vampire react, and I liked that. I thought that was really cool. It was most beautifully done in The Hunger, when you see Catherine Deneuve bite Susan Sarandon's wrist, and it even cuts to close-ups of the blood intermingling, and all of that. And it's, it's such a funny thing. Like, if you think about, like, human sexuality is a combination, and yes, it's this procreation. We use the same mechanics, but it's totally different. But if you really think about it, all we really want is our partners to know how to touch us or whatever, and be unafraid to do whatever it is. And if you think about it, it's kind of goofy. Like the whole, if you think about, like, I'm a big fan of sexuality and eroticism, but if you think back what people are doing, it's pretty goofy. Like it's not goofy when you're in the moment and you're with your partner and you're thinking about all this stuff. But if you stand back and you watch it dispassionately, I can only imagine, like, if an alien entity is watching human mating rituals, they'd be like, that looks.
But we are goof people, Robert.
We are goof. We are goof people. You're right. You're right. I mean, but it's just when it comes right down to it, it's such a goofy. Because again, we're trapped. Like, our intellect and our spirit are trapped in these bodies that we so desperately want to have pleasured by our partners, and the way we do it is, it's goofy. I mean, it
is, and fantasy is important. As you mentioned, we don't get the fantasy or the anticipation or even the innuendo oftentimes in films anymore, and we need that. I mean, that's a lot of the spice of sexuality and that we look for. We're looking for this. We all want to see that. So to deny us of it, it's really cruel. It's cruel.
We can't even flirt anymore.
No.
Like I mean, in the workplace, I was never rude or mean or anything like that. But if you're witty, I try to be witty. But if I like witty people, and if you're in the workplace environment, I was always in places that was flirtatious, but it wasn't in a weird, creepy way. It was mutual. It was understood. It was mutual consent because you both know each other. Yeah. But I missed that kind of. It made being in the workplace fun. I mean, like, I knew that I was never going to be sleeping with my coworkers, but the way we talked it was fun, suggestive, happy.
It was banter back and forth.
Yeah, it was banter back. And you can't, all of that's gone because people have lost the art. They don't understand how to do it without being weird and creepy and lascivious now. Yeah. And it's that there's a horror story to be told there. I mean, The Handmaid's Tale, the way they ritualized procreation. I mean, that was was horrific.
That whole thing is, honestly, it is rape. Like, it's the worst, most horrific, existence for anybody. And it's not just the woman, like, that whole society is messed up. That whole situation where they just don't value these women anymore. It's like they don't mean anything to them.
Using religion as a means of control and, just exploring the lustful side of procreation. Like, that's mainly, like, you're using. And the thing is, when we look at shows like that, a lot of people look at it and be like, wow, no, that can't be real. It is reality now. It is reality, and they're all cults exactly like that right now.
Yeah, and there's craziness, and then the idea that they're going to control. I mean, the problem is, to me, the one reason why women have to have the right to exert their own desires over their own bodies is because, if not, there's a control issue there that a Handmaid's Tale future is not far off.
Yeah,
and I think that's just horrifying.
Exactly.
You know, and
now wasn't there like a movie in the 80s that was like
Yep.
the Handmaid's
It
Tale?
it was an adaptation of the same source material.
Yep.
And it had a famous actress in it. It wasn't Faye Dunaway, was it?
No, it was I want to say Natasha Richardson or let's see. Oh,
I thought maybe Faye Dunaway played the
she might have.
the woman who wanted.
Yeah, I think you
child
might
or
be
something
right
like
about that. I think you might be right about that.
And she was good in it. She was very like what's the word? Sinister.
Yeah.
That's the word I would use for her character. She was very sinister, and she, you know, kind of supported this notion in that society about it. But what I liked about the film was, you know, of course, in the story, it was over 20, 30 years old. The girl gets away, and she, after all, what happens is she meets this guy. I guess he's, you know, working there, and that's who she has her baby with. And it's kind of like, it's romantic, but it's actually very terrifying.
Yeah.
Very terrifying.
Yeah, the movie came out in 1990, and it was the screenplay was by Harold Pinter, and it was directed by Volker Schlondorf, and it was Natasha Richardson as Offred and Faye Dunaway as Serena Joy, and Robert Duvall as the commander. So it's a great cast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when that came out, and that's right. Elizabeth McGovern, Victoria Tennant, Aidan Quinn. Oh, Ryuichi Sakamoto did the music. Wow. That's cool. But yeah, it's literally the same story based on the same book from Margaret Atwood's book. Well, kids, when we should probably wrap this up, only because I have to get up early and do more streams tomorrow. And it's you guys. It's now what, 6 o'clock in the morning where you're at?
6 o'clock in the
6
morning.
o'clock.
6 a.m.
Almost time for coffee.
This has been another great conversation. I wonder if you might have some final thoughts on the horror genre. Is it still important today? We still need it.
Yes.
We need the catharsis. What do you think?
I think we do. I think it's highly important because the thing is, we need that smack in the face. We need the smack in the face of, you know, our own dark, the dark, twisted imagery of humanity is, and you know, told from, you know, the horror narrative is what is completely needed right now. Because the thing is, it focuses on things that we all need to think about not just humanity when it comes to the environment, how we treat each other, and just where we're going right now, like where we're headed, and to always, you know, incite that, you know, to always remember that we have the power to change, but these are the horrific after effects of things that you may actually, if you do things that you know you shouldn't do, you know, when it comes to like your fellow man, you know, or, you know, someone, if you do these things, this is the outcome. It's just like showing you, it's like a look at the future of what's to come if we don't make certain things happen now. You know what I mean? So definitely horror is needed. Not even just off, you know, from that aspect, but just from just sheer entertainment. Like, we need that. It's escapism. You know what I mean? Escape just the reality that we live right now. I need that. So definitely
and cathartic.
Relevant. Exactly. Definitely relevant. Definitely relevant.
S Beam sends in a super chat sticker, and Lance Bergsvin goes on to say, is body horror a dying subgenre, or can it be revitalized? Very much looking forward to Cronenberg's new movie, Crimes of the Future. That man is a master. He is, and I've read that script, or actually a version of it from a long time ago. That script is bonkers. It takes everything that he ever said about body horror and ties it up into a bow. It's a great capper for his career. I don't think body horror will ever go out of style. Yeah. I think Titane is a body horror movie. I think that the fact that we are always in the process of our bodies are aging and dying right around us. There's nothing we can do about it. old age, cancers, whatever, and changing that over, whether it's into, there's a movie, it's not really a horror movie, but we did it on Whining About Movies, called Swallow. And I don't know if you've seen this, about a woman that develops this affliction where she just wants to keep swallowing things.
Yeah, I just watched that the other day on Showtime. It
Dude.
actually came on. So yeah.
I mean, it was just an odd film, but that's actually a real affliction.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
where people just want to,
and I mean,
laundry detergent, all sorts of unusual things.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was a weird movie to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of body. Like, I always have in my feed, I think I must have watched one, like Vietnamese dermatologist health spas have like zit popping videos on YouTube. And I like watched one, and who doesn't? It's very gratifying. So, but to watch, to watch somebody's
satisfying.
to watch somebody's blackheads popped out of their skin. But that, in a way, what if you took that to the nth degree? You like, who's making these videos? How did somebody know that they would get millions of views on YouTube? Somebody had to figure that out. Well, what if, like, I'll tell you, there's a really disturbing horror movie made by Brett Leonard, who made The Lawnmower Man, called Feed. And Feed is about a guy who is a feeder. Like, he feeds. And in this movie, there are women that become morbidly, hugely, like 500, 600 pounds. And it's all about this guy has set up, he finds these women and he loves them and he worships them and he gives them more and more food. But they're connected to the internet, and people are betting on how long it's going to take them to eat themselves to death. Mm-hmm. It's so twisted. And it's also the cops that are going after these guys to find out where they are and maybe save these women. Yeah. I mean, it is a twisted movie. But it's based on true stories, about their men that just worship these women. They're feeders, and that's what they do. They feed and clean. I mean, you don't even have to make this stuff up.
It's there. It's right there for you.
We're a wacky bunch, we human beings.
Bro.
And there's a documentary, and I think it's on Netflix, but I'm not sure, of a televangelist who sort of like under the guise of being directed by God would bring in members into his church and perform medical procedures in front of everybody.
Wow.
Without anesthesia on individuals, on their eyes, on their bodies, everywhere. So the horror is real. Like, it is real.
Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future has a component of that, by the way, in it. Mm-hmm. So, can you imagine? Just people are weird.
Yeah.
On that lovely note, kids, these are such great conversations. I feel like we should do this every night, but we wouldn't get any sleep.
We need to continue this conversation. There's so much more to talk about, and what an enjoyable night.
Great night. I want to thank my moderators. Bunyan Snipe was here. The twins. Paul, I don't think Simon was here, but Paul was here. I want to thank Bunyan and Paul for being here. I want to thank everybody who generously supports this channel through super chats and tips. And also, you can also write us letters. If you want to write the three of us letters, you can go to the Burnettwork.net website and send us letters. I usually read letters on this show all the time. You can do that. It's free of charge, and we'll read them aloud. If you want to just send us personal messages, you can do that. Just say, personal to Lael or personal to whatever you want. Except 200-watt studio. No personal messages to. I'm not passing those along. I'm gonna leave the courtship of Eddie's father up to you. I'm not gonna do that. So you can be smooth. I can tell you're smooth, but man, I can't facilitate. Well, maybe you can grease the palms, and maybe I will. You do a pretty good job of that already, but we'll see. Where can people find you, Lael?
You can find me at the 1/6 Scale Man YouTube channel. Definitely, I have a couple of different segments there. Normally on Mondays we actually have comic book talk with friends. This Monday we will be it'll be spoiler, spoiler for we will actually be having a full spoiler episode where we talk and dissect the Venom Let There Be Carnage film. So we'll be doing that. On Wednesday, we're going to probably actually have the Say What episode where we just talk about nothing but collectibles, all the new releases, 1/6 scale releases that we've gotten this week. And, you got to keep in mind that there is New York Comic Con, Sideshow's New York Comic Con this week. So we're going to see more releases. So we'll probably actually talk about that as well. Also, we'll have on Thursday night, we have Uncivilized Scoundrels, where it's, complete Star Wars talk. So you can actually see us there. Hope to have everyone tune in for that. If you haven't already subscribed, do it now. And yeah, like you can definitely find me there. You can find all the lovely people that I have right now on most of the actual episodes. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
And where can people find you besides 200 Watt Studios Dreams?
You can find me on the Burnettwork.
Yes, you can. But
Yeah.
except for 200 Watt Studio. No, he's found you here. He's found you here. It's all good. Well, listen, kids, I want to thank Lael for being here, and I want to thank for being here. What a great conversation. What a great way to spend time at night, in the middle of the night, talking, having these philosophical conversations about horror movies. It's fantastic. Yes. I'm sure we'll have more. And, of course, next week, I want to point out that one of the stars, the death metal ninja from American Ninja, will be on next week. Josh with Dave Parker and I guess you'll be at Comic-Con. I don't know. Oh, you will be here for Midnight Metal on Friday, right?
I will.
I'd love to get a full report on what you've seen, what you've experienced, any news, any 6-scale news. I mean, I'm sure I will be all over that too, but I want to hear all of your impressions of the New York Comic-Con.
Yes.
And on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. Yeah. And with that, I would say to all of you, have a better day.
Yes. Let's go.